Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Episode 281 of The Team House. I'm Jack Murphy here with Dave Park. Our guest on tonight's episode is Eric Deming. Eric served as a diver in the Navy and then went on to also serve as a SEAL afterwards. Almost, I think, 27 years in the Navy, all told, 20 of them as a SEAL. And he's also a bit of a whistleblower, so we'll talk about that as well. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to tell folks about our Patreon. There's a link down in the description, and you can subscribe for just $5 a month, and you get access to all of these Team House episodes ad-free. Also, our Eyes On episodes, our other podcast with Andy Milburn and Jason Lyons. So yeah, if you guys will support the channel and get access to all these episodes ad-free, we really appreciate it. So thank you. Eric, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, Jack, Dave, thanks for having me on. And I like the introduction a little bit because we went to the Navy diver side a little bit, which was a great time in my career also. It was, it wasn't that long, but it was long enough for me to really enjoy it. And then as a SEAL, and then here recently, a whistleblower. But actually, even when I was in the time, active, there was, I filed an IG complaint against some of these, guys that were doing some things wrong in my community. And I'll get into that here.
Yeah. I'd like to start off if you tell us a little bit about like how you grew up and how that took you into the Navy and what your path was there.
Yeah, so I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but grew up most of my life in Florida. When fifth grade, my parents got divorced. I moved back up to the Boston area, right outside of Boston. It's called Chelsea. I was a minority being a white guy there. And so it was a lot of street fighting, things along those lines in the inner city because I came from Florida, a little bit different than them. So I kind of stood out. So there's a lot of, fighting that got involved with as a kid growing up. So I was kind of a little bit ruffian. My dad wasn't the best example of a father. So I learned a lot of what not to do. But then at a point in my life, I go back down to Florida. And my stepfather had a good friend. His name was Buck Buckles. And he kind of took me under like a grandson. And this was the first person that in my life that I considered a mentor. Somebody that I looked up to. He had a perfect family life. Somebody that would just stood out, did everything right. And I wanted to emulate somebody like him. And he was the one that encouraged me the whole military and was the example. His whole family, just great people. One of the best, families that I could ever say in America is, the Buckles family and all his kids and grandkids. And anyway, so that's who encouraged me and I think put me on the right path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what was that path?
So I joined the Navy, coming from a small town in Florida when I say my graduating class was 100, right at 100. We were, when I say we were agricultural, we were out in the middle of the sticks and we were pretty much redneck, but it really, taught me how to fix my own stuff, how to shoot, how to swim, how to, do a lot of different things to survive. And so I appreciated, and I call my grandfather Buck. He grew up during the Depression, so he taught me a lot of these skills and a lot of these different things. So it was a great time in my life, learning all that stuff. So when it was time for me to graduate high school, I was just like, okay, college wasn't probably, the right thing for me. And he said, well, maybe you should think about, the military. And that's what encouraged me. I had an uncle that was in the Navy. So I joined the Navy. And I ended up, he talked me into the electronics, which was, avionics electronics, which was not something that I took to very well, but I got to work up on a flight deck, sending aircraft off but you start off as a plane captain up there in a squadron, then you get to work on your aircraft, and then you get to be the guy, if you're doing everything right and you're getting your head on the swivel and you can operate up on the flight deck with a lot of dangerous stuff kind of happening, you can be the final checker, which is a guy who wears a white shirt and it's checkered, and you basically, as it's up on the catapult getting ready to launch off, you go into it and you check certain things to make sure everything looks like it's going to go off the front of the pointy end and actually fly.
Are you the guy that gets to squat there and do like this?
That's the guy that you tell him that he can do that. So
Okay.
I tell him that I give him the thumbs up, like, on my side of the aircraft. Another guy on the other side, they tell that guy, like, hey, this plane's good to go, and then he sends it off.
So he gets all the glory, but they do all the work.
That's the guy you see in Top Gun. You don't see the supervisor.
Yeah. Well, we're running in there while this thing's under full throttle, as far as and it's things can happen or whatever. But it was an exciting time. I enjoyed it. But then I got into the diving Navy after that. And so I joined in 87. In 91, I go to dive school, second class dive school, and become a Navy diver. And that was another great part of my career that I really loved and enjoyed. And if I didn't get accepted into the SEAL teams, or if I didn't make it through BUDS, I would have been happy just doing that the rest of my life. Even though as a diver, I worked at an EOD command as far as, and I was in the reserves for a short period of time also. And I went through an EOD reserve course that they had. And during that time I was there SEAL of the year, and it kind of advanced up a little bit further to different levels. And when it was time for me to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I wanted to go back into the Navy active duty, but I had already screened positive to go to BUDS. I had all the screening tests done, but the diving detailer at the time said, nope, if you're coming back in the Navy, because I was in the reserves, I was a first class petty officer. And I said, hey, I'm willing to come in. I'm ready to go down to E5. I'll sign whatever contract you want me to sign. I just want, if I get the chance to go to BUDS. And the diving detailer was just like, nope, if you're coming in, you're going to a junk boat, which is a salvage recovery boat, which is it's rough duty. And I was just like, no, the only reason I'm coming in is because I've screened, and BUDS is willing to take me. And luckily that command, as far as Mark Verado and some other great challenge, some great, people there, said that they would send me to BUDS and basically as an activated reservist. So I got, instead of going down one rank, which I was willing to do, and I was willing to sign a contract for 4 years or whatever they wanted me to sign it for. I got to go to BUDS as an activated reservist, and if I failed out, I could go back to being a reservist. And so I didn't have any real weight over my shoulders, other than not letting my grandfather down as far as Buck or my family down. So that's when I got there. I classed up with BUDS class 215. Shortly at, towards the end of Hell Week area, I took over as the LPO, and we almost had the biggest class graduate, as far as we were just a tight class, great group of guys, and a lot of successful team guys came, out of that class and done great things.
To back up a little bit, Eric, could you talk to our audience a little bit more about the Navy diver profession? Because I think there's a lot of people out there who don't understand. There's different types of Navy divers, right? Even within that career field, right?
Oh, correct. So you start off as a second class diver, and you're able to dive down to 165 feet with just, with air, not mixed gas. And once you get a little bit of experience, then you can go to first class dive school, and that's when you can go deeper. Now you can get into mixed gas. There's more responsibilities, become a dive supervisor. And you do more technical diving. You're just not a guy on the end of an umbilical anymore. You're kind of more technical background and dealing with the mixed gases and all that type of stuff, and running chambers and that type of stuff. Then from there you can become a saturation diver, where you can stay down for much longer period of time, and that's where it gets a lot more dangerous, and you end up with long-term effects from that sometimes. And you can become a master diver. Once you get to, hold so many qualifications, you make chief and you become a master diver. So it's kind of the progression of different things, and you got special projects. You got a lot of different things you can do as a Navy diver. I ended up at an EOD Mobile Unit 6 command, and we, at they were training sea lions, they were training dolphins, as far as all those programs, that divers and EOD guys do, were some of the stuff that I got to be around and participate in, and got to do a lot of diving, a lot of bounce diving off the coast of Charleston. Also did a lot of spearfishing and, artifact diving, which was, pretty beneficial too. I enjoyed that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but like from talking to people in the past, my understanding of the marine mammal program, and then going on with that, what the EOD divers do, is that they kind of act as like the pathfinders, so to speak, go out there and find the obstacles that the Navy is going to have to take their ships through, and then you guys go out and destroy them.
There's different programs. The sea lions were mainly used for things that were on the bottom that we knew were down there, that we wanted them to go down to attach, a rope to it so we can pull it up, because they could dive down to like 500 feet, be down there a couple of minutes and come back, where to send a diver down that deep was, pretty difficult to do. Then, with the dolphin programs, there's ones that do cameras. There's guys that are, there's dolphins that are anti-swimmer, which, those things will kick your ass.
Assault
as far
dolphins.
And my EOD buddies, after I made it through BUDS, of course, they present me with the, it's basically got a dolphin who's got like a frog in his hand squishing it, the Mark 7 program, because it's just like, because we were trying to swim against these dolphins all the time. I've
heard they're no joke, and they find you every single time.
It's like a no-win situation.
Yeah. It's a no-win situation running against those things.
Yeah.
And the dolphins get pretty smart because they're wearing like a harness with like a bang stick on it. They get pretty smart. You're down there with a helmet and padded up, and these things. All of a sudden, you hear the click, 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 and all of a sudden he comes in there and it just knocks the shit out of you. And it's just like you hear it coming. You ball up a little bit, but they knew where to hit the soft spots and everything else. You're just like
a dolphin can get up to like 500-600 pounds, right?
Yeah. At least that size. Yeah,
it's no joke.
Considering that like a potted dolphin will fuck up a great white, like it's like, oh, people, no problem.
Yeah. This is easy for them.
Yeah,
it was pretty funny. But yeah, it was a great time in my career. I really enjoyed it. Got to do that, and and I just felt like I had to, do another challenge, something more, I was looking for, and that's when I decided to go to BUDS.
So, no offense, Eric, I don't want to hear about how hard your BUDS class was. I've been told it's very difficult and that you guys were very cold. Yeah. We all know that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I know it's a very challenging course. But what year did you graduate BUDS?
97. Oh, well, I went in 97. 98 is when I graduated.
Okay.
So went in, it was basically going through the winter. It was like BUDS class 215, February, I should know this date, but it was like February 21st or 28 or something like that when I graduated.
Did you, just to ask a question about BUDS that is unique to you, did they make you, because you had been a diver, did they make you like maintain the dive locker or do some stupid bullshit because like
of your previous
experience?
Okay, so first thing, luckily I had other divers that were in my class. So there was, I think we started off with like 4 divers that were, you start off with like 160, whatever our number was. And most of the divers got through. So just good on the divers, for getting through it, because it was challenging. But since I was kind of senior guy showing up there already, in E6, which is high, pretty high ranking, at the time in the community, the instructors were mainly E5s and, E6s and chiefs and stuff like that. And so if you don't realize that you don't know shit about being a SEAL and you come in there and you try to throw your rank around as far as, so I was just like, and I consider myself a humble guy. I think they read me correctly. Did any other E6s graduate in my class? No, they all got rolled out at some point, I think. No, there was one other E6 in my class that graduated. And so long story short, a lot of E6s don't make it through. And because of they're not sure if you can handle not your rank doesn't represent who you are because you don't have the experience. So if you can't basically put your rank to the side and basically say, hey, I'm a FNG, I'm willing to learn, I'm coming in with a lot of experience, of different aspects and everything else, but I don't know what it is to be a SEAL yet. So, and they could see that I was willing to learn and that I wasn't, relying on my rank for respect or whatever. I was going to earn it. And so that's, I guess, if I had to say something, as far as, getting through buds, that's when it was, for me. So I'm getting off on a tangent, but as an E6, as the LPO of the class, you're the guy with the watch. And so you're and if whatever, so me and Clay Tippins, he's the class leader. We have to make sure that the class is on time to all the different events. We're running all over the base all the time for these different things, whether it's going to the pool, going to the dive tower, going wherever, it's our responsibility to make sure that the class is there on time. And I got the watch to do it. Well, on my watch, I had a dive helmet on it, and I was just like, so you don't want to stand out in buds. And so, but now I'm forced into the role of the LPO, which, it wasn't, I would have been happy not being that job also because that added attention or whatever. But whenever the class made a mistake, it was always mine and the class leader's, responsibility to unfuck it. Sorry if I
no, you can say
use
fuck
the
it,
language.
unfuck it.
Unscrew it. So we end up doing lots and lots of push-ups for the class all the time. And so we got really good at doing a lot of push-ups for making up mistakes that we might have caused or the guys in the class did it. And so anyway, as far as they gave me extra attention going through pool comp and going through the dive phase of it, because they were just wanted to make sure that I was comfortable in the water. And it was challenging, trust me. Even as a diver, with, at that time probably had close to 700 dives, honestly. And so when I went through pool comp, with a double hose regulator, and the instructors wanted to make sure I was comfortable in the water, and luckily I got through it.
You got some extra attention.
Yeah.
So you get to the teams, and something I'd love to ask you about that not a lot of people, I think, know about is that you guys did have a real-world mission going on prior to 9/11, which was the oil smuggling in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah, great point. So because I was the LPO of the class, they said, hey, you get to pick a team. They said, just like, so I chose SEAL Team 2, which was the most operational command at the time that I knew about from the little bit of knowledge I had. It was the next challenge, trying to get there. Luckily, I was able to get SEAL Team 2. SEAL Team 2 had a great reputation. Now that I'm at SEAL Team 2, you go through SEAL tactical training. That's where you actually learn how to do your job as a SEAL. BUDS is a weeding out process. Make sure that you have the mental fortitude to get through and you won't quit. And you'll persevere through whatever, obstacles are thrown in front of you. SEAL tactical training, which got changed to SEAL qualification training later on. But SEAL tactical training is where you learn your job as a SEAL. I was the honor man for that class. So then because of that, you go into like a draft or, something along the platoons are trying to pick the guys coming out at STT. I got selected for a winter warfare platoon, which is a very, another hard, challenging, environment, that you're going to go to. We got to go up to Alaska and train. And that was, a guy from Florida, basically going up there and surviving was pretty interesting, and learn all the, telemark skiing and all that type of stuff. Took to it. It was great. Loved it. So I did that deployment. Then I come back off of that deployment. I get into a strike platoon, and that platoon basically gets deployed to the Persian Gulf when Saddam Hussein was smuggling. This all prior 9/11. And that platoon, we start taking down oil smuggling coming out of the Tigris River. There was a small little window where they hit international waters, because if they went into Iranian waters, then there's an international incident. We were not supposed to be in their waters, and get into a gunfight, with guys with bigger guns. Maybe not so much. Anyway, but as far as it can get challenging, and so we did 5 or 6 real world boardings, took control of these ships, and that was pretty exciting because they were welded. They had barbed wire on the outside of it. They were welded into these things. It was all blacked out. Basically, it was hard to find them. They had helicopters flying around with radar, just trying to locate them. Then you had a small window to get on it. Then you had to cut into it with quickies and Broco torches and that type stuff. So you got sparks flying all over the place in the middle of the night, and just getting on board the ship was challenging, and we just had a great time doing it. It was ridiculously hot, as far as it was 120 during the day and 110 at night. And you got your flotation on, you got your body armor, you got all this equipment on. Then you're climbing up there, then you get into the engine room or trying to go through the ship, and most of them didn't have AC, or it wasn't like a Navy ship, comfortable, environment to be in. So then you had to get control of it and not get hopefully into shot or get hurt or something along those lines, and then get control of the ship and then move it to a safe area that was controlled by the big Navy.
And were you guys roping onto the deck or climbing the caving ladder?
It was mainly caving ladder. As far as we were hooking and pulling, we had snipers that were circling around, in the helicopters, but we were using a hook and caving ladder to get on board most of the time.
This is the old school days of like OD green coveralls, Nomex gloves, the Oakley goggles, and MP5s.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, we were all in flight suits at the time. So there is actually, there's a picture floating around on the internet with a bunch of guys on the back of a Mark V with their shirts off, and I'm in that picture with those guys. As far as that was that platoon that we were doing it. It was just, that was really before the internet really it was somewhat taken off, but we didn't realize if you sent the picture to somebody, it could get posted all over the place. And next thing you know, like, we're getting shit from the command, like, you guys are fucking all over the internet. And, we're just like, the guy that did it didn't mean to do it. And anyway, it was just like, so that picture floated around for for a period of time.
How were some of your guys, like qualified to pilot like these larger ships, or would you get a pilot on there in order to help you get, like, how did that happen once you do the VBSS, right? And and for people who don't know, it's visit, board, search, and seizure. That's VBSS.
Exactly it. Yep.
And so you do the VBSS, you take over the ship, and then who steers the damn thing after that?
Yeah, it matters what size of the ship it is, because the real big ones have an engine room and a control room down in it, and they're the ones that are they're just getting relayed information down to them. These ones were mainly smaller ones, so the helm was up there on the bridge, and so we had naval officers that were SEALs also, and SWO qualified, or and then if they were small enough, and plus we just got control of the crew and told them, get on this heading, and we just make sure they were on the right heading, and and didn't do anything shady. Most of them were pretty compliant, scared shitless, and they were just, a lot of them weren't even Iraqi or Afghani or Iranian or anything. They were just guys that were contracted to be on there. So,
and then 9/11 happens while you're over there. Tell us about that, what that experience was like, and then leading us into, you ended up doing 3 deployments to Iraq and 3 to Afghanistan.
Yeah, so we just get finished up, with all the boardings. We've already, we were a strike platoon, so we had all our stuff in what we call tri-wall boxes, and it was all getting ready to be flown back home on C-17 or whatever it was going to get, onto. Our deployment was pretty much done. The aircraft carrier and the whole battle group was already going down around the Horn of Africa. Then all of a sudden the towers get hit. We're in Bahrain enjoying liberty for a little while, and next thing you know, the towers get hit. The battle group gets turned around, comes back up there. We get thrown onto a frigate or a couple of small ships before we can get to the aircraft carrier. Then we get on the aircraft carrier, waiting for the bombing campaign to start off, and we're a CSAR package on top, on the aircraft carrier. But unfortunately, they couldn't refuel in flight, so the helicopters couldn't go, like as far as the Army helicopters could go into country, into Afghanistan. And so we were limited on what we could do. So we sat out in the Persian Gulf thinking we're going to the show, and pretty much all we did was do circles out there. And board team guys is not a good thing. And just because we got some of our stuff on the ship, and we stopped in France for a period of time, so we had a bunch of French wine, and some of our guys decided to drink some of that while they're on there and get in a little bit of trouble as far as anyways. So board team guys is not a good thing, and luckily it didn't really affect too many guys, but we did get in a little bit of trouble for that, for having a little bit of alcohol on the ship that we shouldn't have had on there at the time. So anyway, we come back, not to get on a tangent there, but we come back off that deployment. That's when they did the whole force reorg, as far as they went from SEAL teams to squadrons, the whole Force 21. So all the guys coming back from, I was at SEAL Team 2, next thing you know, we're all going to, because, the war kicked off, and they reorged how we're going to basically deploy. So all those guys that came back off that deployment, whether it was the ARG or the strike platoon, all went to SEAL Team 4. So now you got most of the SEAL Team 2 is now at SEAL Team 4. And so we start the whole workup process. And I'm doing my LPO now. I've got 2 platoons underneath my belt, some experience. I'm a dive supervisor. I'm a free fall jump master. I got, different qualifications that I can be an LPO. Now I'm the LPO of that platoon. So we deployed to Germany, as far as we still had those commitments going on with, Bosnia and, and all that type stuff kind of happening. And then Liberia, as far as the rebel forces overran the capital of Monrovia in Liberia. And so we get on the hook to do this, the NEO in Liberia. And honestly, so after 3 deployments to Iraq and 3 deployments to Afghanistan, the most scared, is in Liberia.
Really?
Because we flew in, the first thing we had 3 different ways of inserting, at the time, because the big Army couldn't get down there. They had closed off the airport, so we were going to have to come from the sea. So we were either going to do an MCADS, which we were an MCADS platoon, and we'd already been in the air one time before, ready to do an MCADS drop on an Iranian ship that was doing some stuff or bringing some stuff that they shouldn't have been bringing or a ship that was going to bring stuff there. And they turned at the last minute. Well, as we were at the end of the ramp ready to jump out before, doing free fall with the MCADS, 11-meter ribs. And now we're getting ready. Now we're down in Liberia doing a NEO. Basically one of our insertion methods was MCADs, and they were going to just sink those things after we swam to the beach. And, those things aren't, cheap things. Or we were going to do rubber ducks, as far as that's was somewhat limited to. And then the last thing we hit Freetown. It's just like, we might be able to get some contracted aircraft from other agencies. And luckily they were able to fly us in there with some of those. Well, one of those helicopters flew in a small group first. And, I think there's probably 10 of us on that first flight. And when we hit the ground there, the French embassy had already been overrun. They had all the people that were in the American embassy. I don't know if you've ever been to the American embassy in, Monrovia. The walls are only maybe 7-8 foot tall, just a single block wall, not very well fortified. And you could see the terror on everybody's face when we showed up there, how scared they were. And we didn't know what we were getting into. We go up to the front, and there's thousands and thousands of people just trying to get into the embassy. And some of them saying they're American citizens, some of them, then you got the rebel forces that are driving by with AK-47s and RPGs and giving you the stink eye. You're just like, shit, they're going to, they're just probing us the whole time, trying to, see what kind of weakness we had. To the point where the second helicopter coming in was supposed to bring in food, water, plus the rest of the guys. We said, forget the food, forget the water, bring ammo. It was good. We didn't have enough ammo if it came over to a bad situation. So for, a little over a week, we were awake, and we had to keep from rotating from one position to another position, changed our looks a little bit, make it look like we had a much bigger force. We only had 18 guys, but we had to make it look, and we had to cover a lot of property as far as the embassy, where they could attack us from. And so we had to make ourselves look a lot bigger than what we were, more intimidating what we were. So we were constantly changing how we looked and what we looked like. So it's a fresh face every 2 hours somewhere else. But we didn't sleep for, honestly, very, very little sleep for about a week, until finally other guys got in there to help us out.
We had a State Department official on the show recently, Dante Paradiso, who was here. And he actually wrote a whole book about the evacuation. He was there when it happened. But I also know there were like 6 or 7 evacuations at the time of Liberia, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which one was which.
Yeah, this was 2003.
Okay.
2003, I think, as far as if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was like right around 2003. Yeah.
So
after.
I was just
Yeah,
going to
I'm
ask you, had you had mentioned that the French embassy had already been overrun. Do you know if the French civilians that were there, had they made it to the American embassy, or were they caught up by the Liberians?
No, they were in the American embassy. Mm-hmm. You had all the missionary type people that were, they would, the rebel forces would roll by and just throw bodies, on the ground, basically trying to intimidate us. As far as human life isn't worth very much over there in their eyes. And so it was an eye-opening experience for me. And so that was when I was just like, if this, and the ROEs was anybody comes over the wall, you could shoot them, where I was just like, man, some of these people are just scared, or just, they might be, an American who's trying to get into the embassy. So just because they're on the wall, just like, hey, realize what a real threat is, if it's overwhelming, and we got to, we have to make a point, but if you don't have to, let's not do it. And luckily we didn't have to fire any shots. Everything went super smooth. It was, I was very proud of how professional they were with that overwhelming force in front of them, and that guys didn't get trigger itchy or try to do something stupid that causes the situation for us. And so all the guys were super professional and did great things. So then from there, now I just finished up my LPO, and I was able to stay, I pick up chief, so E7, I have a successful combat, or tour. We did anyway. So now I'm a chief. I stay at SEAL Team 4. I pick up a platoon, and now we're doing a new workup. We're deploying this will be my first time going to Iraq. And at that time, the number one strategic mission was protecting the interim government of Iraq. So we're all getting trained up in PSD as far as personal protection, details. And so we're all in competition as far as, trying to do that job correctly. And on top of the diving, the jumping, and everything else you're doing now, we got a new tasking kind of somewhat. We're getting up to speed on it. I had already done a couple of POTUS trips on that last platoon that I was just talking about. And when he went to Africa, I went with George Bush all over that. We had, that was another great story we can get into another time. But because of the experience and how well the platoon was doing, we got the number one guy, in Iraq, Dr. Alawi, the Prime Minister of Iraq. So my platoon was protecting him. And he was a busy guy, as far as lots of people coming to see him and things along those, but he would also go out of country from time to time. And whenever he went out of the country, we could go up and help out, Danny and Bill's platoon who were doing direct action. So our guys were doing PSD missions, and they were going out and helping with direct action missions at night, or, be up there for a week or two. And that's where you really got to hone your skills a little bit better and got experience on direct action missions up there. And the guys were having a great time doing that type of stuff up there also. that's where, and we'll get into this later on, but where the CQD starts coming into effect for me, close quarters defense. And I was talking to you guys a little bit, about it earlier, but that's when it all kind of came to oh, I got it now, as far as why we're doing that training and why prisoner control and, why it's why it's operationally focused and things along those lines. So now that, with great success on that deployment, come back off of that. That's my 4th platoon workup and deployment. They said, Eric, you got to go to training. You can't, you can't stay here. You can't do another platoon chief, which honestly, most guys in the teams, that's where they would like to stay, because that's when you're directly, with your guys and your decisions, and how you have a direct effect on guys' lives that, and they on yours too. And so you're the closest. And so platoon chief is kind of the sweet spot within the SEAL community. Finish that up. They got people in the pipeline that need to do it, also the next leadership block or whatever. They said, you got to go to training. I had the CQD course, close quarters defense course, had a great reputation. If you wanted to get operationally focused, better qualified, understand how to operate as an operator, try to become a CQD instructor. So I put my name in the hat. I got selected to be an instructor. Shortly after that, I pick up E8. My mentor, Noel Harris, leaves, and I take over as a course manager on the East Coast for, close quarters defense. Now, this is in the middle of war, and you're sending, the guys that you're training are going, could be leaving in a week to go over there. So what you teach them can either save their lives or get them killed. So that's the amount of responsibility that's thrown onto the CQD instructors. And it's, the CQD instructors, most of them all came from a mixed martial arts background of some sort, or boxing or grappling or wrestling. So it wasn't like, when Jocko on his podcast, he said, hey, there was this system for a little while that was in the pipeline. He misleads the public, because that system has been in the SEAL community for over 20 or 22 years. Mm-hmm. So longer than Jocko was actually in the Navy, CQD has been one of our most important courses that we could go through. Whenever we did a dog and pony show for Congress or anybody coming over, that's what they would go show them would be the CQD course. That's how well respected and how operationally focused it was. So to become an instructor, was an honor. It's something that it wasn't easy. You had to go through this, this instructor forging process. And Dwayne Dieter, who came up with the system, he would train the instructors directly for SEAL CQD level 1 and 2. You go through this forging thing, and to be honest with you, like log PT at Buds was like the hardest thing I had ever done up until that point. Fighting for your life, going through CQD forging, and how, as far as your mistakes and things you did right, but fighting until you were totally exhausted, and then fighting for another 5 minutes more because you're about to get your head cut off, and if you didn't, basically so you knew how important the training was, is because it was making you operationally focused, but it was also physically demanding, because when you get exhausted, that's when your mistakes started coming out, and that they could correct. Eric, so the instructors would, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to ask you. Can you walk us through who Dieter was, how CQD came about, and what CQD in sort of its breadth was, and then how it came to the SEAL teams?
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. So Dwayne Dieter was working with the DEA task force up in Maryland, Baltimore area, taking down big drug houses that were happening up there. There's a lot of drugs being run up in that area at the time. He had a roommate when he was in college that was a team guy, and Dwayne comes from a huge mixed martial arts background. He was high level, 5th or 6th degree black belts in multiple different things. And so he had that background. his SEAL buddy was getting trained in some mixed martial arts type stuff. Thought Dwayne would be kind of happy to kind of guess what we're learning type situation. Well, Dwayne's been developing CQD on the side because his stuff wasn't working when he was taking down DEA drug houses, and a person that he called him his teacher, but he was a master. He said your purpose was to come up with this system. And so when Dwayne couldn't get trained at any higher level on that side, his teacher said, what you want doesn't exist. You have to develop this. And so that's when Dwayne started developing close quarters defense. And he was only doing it for himself and for, maybe his select buddies that were doing the DEA, task force type stuff. But his SEAL buddy basically said, hey, this is something that we probably could use too. So he did a demonstration for him. And next thing you know, at SEAL Team 6, he's down there teaching. They gave him an office down there. He was such a well-respected guy down there. He was made an honorary frogman. He does deployments. He goes to Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, he's embedded, really deeply with us. And as enough guys leave Dam Neck, at the time we had the combat fighting courses, we had SCARs, we had a conglomeration of mixed martial art type stuff that didn't really mesh well together. It wasn't operationally focused, and it was sports based. And so even though we got a lot of our guys that come from martial arts background that are CQD instructors, we all understood that one was sports based, which is one-on-one in a ring. The environment in the ring is not very dangerous. You don't have to worry about somebody shooting you from a distance. You don't have to worry about multiple adversaries. You don't have to worry about a guy pulling a knife in the middle of your boxing match and try to stab you. So all these things that you train in this false environment, as far as a sports ring, doesn't really correspond to what's operationally out here. So it was very tight hold. CQD is, why you guys don't really know much about it, why it's interesting to you, is because Dwayne is the ultimate, quiet professional. He just wanted to give it to us. And so that we could, after 9/11, things were dynamic for the United States. And we needed guys with that training out there on the battlefield. And so he was having a great time. We were having a great time. And CQD was just, crushing it overseas. And that's why when I was doing the DAs and, and my guys were doing it, I realized, Tom Bostic was up there training the guys. And I was just like, that's where I wanted to get to if I had to go to training and get myself to be a better operator. So that's how it ends up in the SEAL teams. So Dwayne was teaching down at Dev Group. And when it went to the rest of the teams, that's when he started training the trainer. So when Jocko says, I wanted SEALs training SEALs, that was already happening. He was misleading the public, like, contractors were training SEALs. And that's why we had Dwayne train, at the higher levels as far as, entry and, vehicle takedown and, much, a broader, spectrum of different things that he could train. And the SEAL instructors were doing level 1 and 2, which was basically, mainly direct action prisoner control. And you go from unarmed to armed to shooting to prisoner control to operational physical training. And the one unique thing that no other training system had was the internal warrior. The internal warrior was, after you got trained in all these different things, you got these skills and you validate them. You went through a hooded box drill to validate. You knew that these skills are what you needed to learn. That's why it was having so much success in the SEAL teams. But after you went through validation of that hooded box drill, that's when you come clear to you what you need to be doing as an operator. And so, yeah, so now that you got all this training and you got the internal warrior, the ethical part of the training, that you could use these skills for a lot of bad things if you wanted to. You could, take advantage and, do different things. Just like, what's the purpose of your fight? And so it was our escalation of force. It was our force control. It was, and it helped guys personally ID what the higher threats are, make right decisions, shoot, no shoot, held them accountable, because if they didn't do things right underneath the hood, the role players, we had role players, some of these exercises we did, we had like hundreds of role players that were attacking guys, shooting guys. Some guys were compliant, some guys not compliant. It was just a time in the SEAL community where we were just excelling, and that's why we had made such a good name, on the battlefield early, in our, kind of in the beginning of 9/11, after 9/11 in the war. That's why we had such a solid reputation. So we got that going on, but then on the side note, you got Roberts Ridge. And why I bring that up, because that comes into a conflict here in a little bit, and I'm going to connect some dots for people that don't understand it, and even some SEALs don't understand it. And this is going to educate them on some things. So you got Roberts Ridge, you got Tim Szymanski, who pushes Slab to basically land on the X to do a recce up top of there. He thinks he's going to get Osama bin Laden. He doesn't give a shit about the guys in the helicopter. Tim Szymanski says, nope, don't abort, land that thing up there. And that's when they start getting shot up, and they have to Neil Roberts falls out of the back of it, and the helicopter does a control crash landing a couple clicks away. Another helicopter comes in. They convince that helicopter to go back up there to try to get Neil Roberts. They didn't know that Neil Roberts had been fighting valiantly up there by himself for a period of time, but they had been able to kill him. But they think they're going up there to save him. And great, guys willing to step up there and do that. Then just like that should have been the story, and that the great things could have happened. This sort of tactical mess up. He shouldn't have landed on the X at that point. Tim Szymanski pushed him in there, said, shitty leader, you should have been shit canned, and got rid of, at that time. They land up there. Chapman basically starts going forward because Slab falls, going out of the helicopter or whatever. There's 5 foot of snow. It's a harsh environment. Chapman basically goes up and starts taking down a machine gun bunker, as far as a bunker 1 or whatever it's called. And, if you watch there's a Pred feed on YouTube, you can watch it. It explains the whole thing. In my community, as a SEAL, a CQD instructor, you get guys cycling through, and, and first thing, you're getting after action reports of exactly what's happening in Afghanistan, happening in Iraq, and you're trying to create these scenarios when the guys go through what the guys are running into on the battleground up there right now. So you got guys that are telling you their stories, that are over in country and just come back, but you also got guys that are on these different platoons. And so when we start talking about Roberts Ridge, and some of the DEMNEC guys that roll their eyes and be like, "What's the way you're rolling your eyes about?" And they start telling me the real story about what kind of happened. Just like, yeah, Slab left a guy, left Chapman up there. I'm just like, so I'm kind of hearing it, as far as on the side of, but it doesn't come public for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. Well, Tim Szymanski's, instead of them holding him accountable for that debacle, and then all the lies that they tried to cover up later on, as far as that he does, he advances his career and he ends up at Group 2 as a Commodore. So now I'm a CQD instructor. I'm at, which my CO is over at the center on the West Coast, even though I'm on the East Coast. But I got Tim Szymanski, who is the Commodore of Group 2. And next thing you know, as far as, and I didn't know that he had failed so miserably as a leader at DEMNEC and was kind of pushed out of DEMNEC and pretty much said, you can go away. You don't really fit our need here. And we didn't know that Slab had left Chapman behind, and that he was on the wall of the Rock of Shame at, over there, that for all what he had done wrong over at Dev Group. So who does Tim Szymanski pick up to be his command master chief? Slab. So now you got 2 guys that are covering up what actually happened at Roberts Ridge, and now, at that time, they're trying to stop Chapman from getting a Congressional Medal of Honor. And and they're basically trying to cover up, they're changing their stories of what actually happened, from what their original statements were. And so now, in my community, you're just like, we didn't realize these guys had messed up so much. It was kind of just a Dev Group secret up until that point, for the most part, because we didn't, have firsthand information. When that information finally gets to be public, as far as, I was just like, well, shit, no wonder I was having such a hard time with this guy, because he he had tried to bribe Dwayne Dieter because he wanted Dwayne Dieter to basically teach CQD or mixed martial arts and put a SEAL trident on it and say, hey, you're the SEAL martial arts trainer and or CQD trainer or whatever. He wanted to sell DVDs and go out to do franchising schools and stuff like that.
When you say he, who are you talking about?
Tim Szymanski basically tries to bribe Dwayne Dieter to basically franchise his schools and try to put this out to the public. And Dwayne says, hey, that's not why I'm doing this. That's not what I'm about. And, you know, these skills, you know, need to stay close knit for the good guys. If we put it out like you're talking about, the bad guys are going to get it and they're going to use it against us. So he doesn't take the bribe. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't go, you know, he doesn't get in bed with Tim Szymanski, which he kind of knew was kind of shady, but didn't know to how level of a shadiness he was. So that's when they have to work to get rid of Dwayne out of there, because everybody would talk to Dwayne and come clean with everything. He worked with all the squadrons, whether it was gold, red, you know, blue, gray. And so he cross-pollinated everybody and made everybody, you know, a cohesive, you know, kind of a group. And because Dwayne wouldn't take the bribe, you know, Tim Szymanski tries to get rid of him out of Dam Neck. But at that point, it was already spread to the teams. It was already going everywhere. And so why that's important to me, or why I'm bringing it up, is because now I'm the course manager of CQD, and I got guys that are going to combat tomorrow, and I got everybody that's going through the course writes a critique, and they say, great stuff. I wish we need 2 more weeks of it. You know, we should have gotten this early. We need to do this right before we deploy. And just thousands and thousands of SEAL operators saying nothing but great things. And all of a sudden I got Tim Szymanski, who's the Commodore, and some of his cronies underneath him saying, it's not operational. It doesn't work. It doesn't do this. I'm just like, what are you talking about? As far as here's 1,000 critiques. Here's all the after action reports of guys saying how they used it, how effective it was, how they're going to get more of it, how I used it when I was deployed. I'm just like, what the hell are you guys talking about? I had no clue that he tried to bribe Dwayne Dieter. Didn't know anything, really about it. And so I'm running into some heat from the guys that under Group 2, as far as TRADET, who's basically assault cell. And some of those guys have gotten in trouble at Dam Neck, and now they're over in assault cell. So they're in the timeout box because they've gotten in trouble. And now, since Tim Szymanski saved them from getting maybe kicked out totally, they're going to do his bidding, whatever he wants them to do. So they're putting a smear campaign against Dwayne Dieter, saying that he sued the teams, which he never did. That's all bullshit. He tried to say that, Dwayne Dieter or CQD won't let us do mixed martial arts. We have no say-so on what they did, as far as TRADET could do whatever they want. We were part of the center teaching CQD, which everybody wanted. So they kind of they tried to make it like there was a fight between mixed martial arts guys and CQD, which there wasn't.
Right.
All of our instructors were mainly come from that same background already. And we all knew the difference between what was operational and what wasn't operational. One was sports-based and one wasn't. So all of our guys, they tried to, so for the unwitting person, you got a captain, level officer who is basically putting out this smear campaign against, a very highly successful course. Yeah. It was the most sought after. We had more instructor of the years come out of CQD. And it's like I said, it was one of the courses that they used as the example for whenever they did a dog and pony and things along those lines. They had congressional level people. If they wanted to, show how awesome SEALs were, they showed them CQD and a small little thing. So now so I'm running into problems here on the East Coast with CQD, with Tim Szymanski, who I didn't know was a turd at the time. I didn't know how bad he was at the time. I just didn't understand why he was basically doing this. So I'm talking with Dwayne. Dwayne said, yeah, I didn't take a bribe. Dwayne tells me that stuff. And he says, really, kind of don't worry. We weren't really worried about it because Tim Szymanski wasn't really, not a lot of respect, through the community. I don't know how he ended up in that position after he screwed up Roberts Ridge so bad. So I'm running into problems with it. The West Coast guys start running into problems over there. And so I'm just like, they're having similar issues kind of going with some of their TradeEt guys. Well, it just happens to be that the guy that's in charge of that TradeEt is Jocko. So now, so I got Tim Szymanski and I got Jocko, and they're teamed up trying to get rid of close quarters defense. So I'm just like, so Jocko, I'm just like, okay, why is he going against CQD? So I pull up his critiques, which I can put those all over the internet right now. I got access to all those critiques. I was a course manager. I got all the after action reports. And so I look at, Jocko's, his critique when he went through training. Great stuff, highly recommended, the good stuff. Now, Jocko, comes from a jiu-jitsu background or whatever, he does that, but he understood the operationally focus of the training. All his guys that went through in Task Force Bruiser, as far as Leif Babin, as far as Sergeant, all those guys that I got their critiques, they said great things about it when they went through the training. Now, Jocko is in charge of training on, TradeEt, and so I'm just like, well, he was at Team 2 with me, for a period of time before they did the whole Force 20, before he became an officer. So I knew a little bit of his background. I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Then I start hearing about Task Force Bruiser and everything that kind of went on with Task Force Bruiser. And at the time, I didn't know it was Jocko and those guys down there in Ramadi. I just knew that it was SEALs doing daylight patrols and daylight raids, and they're getting good SEALs killed. And we're just like, what the fuck is going on with these guys down in Ramadi? And so at the time, I didn't know exactly who it was or what was going on. The West Coast instructors, as far as, they're getting those guys that went through their training, they came back off that deployment. They're telling all the stories about Chris Kyle shooting people that he shouldn't have been shooting, as far as people off of bikes. He was trying to get a body count. So Chris Kyle goes off the rails. He works directly under Jocko. Jocko is basically pushing him out there because Jocko, the platoon that Jocko relieved, had great success doing DA missions, night raids, and basically Ramadi was a much safer place when they were there. Jocko comes in and he has to try to beat their record. So the only way that he thinks he can beat their record is basically getting a body count.
Kill count.
So he tells Chris Kyle, basically, get a body count. So Chris Kyle starts going out there and to get the numbers that Chris Kyle ended up with, he shot a lot of people he shouldn't have shot. And his platoon starts reporting that type stuff up. And Jocko, it wasn't short period of time before Jocko was just like, you can't approve an op. You can only approve logistical runs.
Eric, when you say people started reporting it up, do you mean that people started reporting his numbers up, or people started reporting up that he was shooting people that he probably should not have been shooting?
So when Mark Lee... Yeah, it's good, great points, and I can jump around a little bit, but so Jocko's in country. Before Mark Lee gets shot, or before that situation happens, SEAL Team 6 operator goes to Jocko, says, "Hey, they know that when you're leaving the wire, you got your Punisher patch, thing on your body armor. They know who you are. They're IDing you when you leave. They're following where you're going to. Your guys are putting up a huge American flag, when you get out there, because you're supposed to be in a sniper hide. You're exposing who you are, and you're going to get guys killed doing what you're doing." And Jocko tells this senior SEAL Team 6 operator, "Fuck you, I'm taking it to the enemy." And so Jocko so this SEAL Team 6 operator basically warns them. And I don't know if Jocko told his guys before they went out that, hey, they already know who you are. They're watching when you leave the wire. They know what your vehicles look like and everything else. I don't know if Jocko told his guys that, but since I've done my last podcast, more and more guys are talking to me from there. So I'm getting more and more information as that kind of happens. So most of them didn't know that he was warned, the guys that I'm talking to so far right now. So Jocko was warned. He sends them out anyway, still doing daylight patrols and and that type of stuff, as far as trying to get into gunfights, trying to basically cause situations that don't need to, killing innocent people that they don't need to kill. Mark Lee ends up getting killed. Some of those guys in the platoon come back with the body, go to the funeral, and they're complaining, basically letting everybody know, hey, Jocko is basically, Chris Kyle's killing innocent people, and Jocko is basically just sending us out on daylight patrol, stuff that we didn't do during the workup, and just kind of just putting us out there. And they're starting to call him a coward. They're saying, Jocko, you're a coward because you're making and most of the time our task unit commanders, went out with us as far as a lot of different times, because you're going, you had a ground, you had, anyway, you had those guys were out on the battlefield with us most of the time. Jocko wasn't going out. So another senior guy that goes to him, says, hey, your guys are calling you a coward because you're sending them out and you're not going out with them. So Jocko says, well, I'll go out. He goes, and I'm going to shoot the first. And he said, sand, and he used the N word, that I see. And he just shows you what his intent was. So he basically tells that, go ahead.
I just want to, I just like, I know you were getting this information from somewhere, but I also want to be very cautious about sort of like he said, she said, because you didn't hear him say that, correct? So, like, I just want to be very.
There's only one other guy in the office with him at the time.
Yeah.
Or there's other people that were in the talk that knew it too. But as far as these are all what's great about it, because as a person who is not on the internet and does podcasts, I can overextend myself and say something that gets myself in trouble, or I can slander or something along those lines. Luckily, I got the truth.
Yeah.
And so it's I'm not concerned. I'll put it that way.
So, real quick, because this has come up when you've been on other shows, and I want to ask you: do you hate SEALs? No, I'm just. Do you hate SEALs?
No. And the reason why, it brings up a great point, because the reason why I'm doing this is because if you let leaders like Jocko, who got guys killed, and you don't expose them for what they did and who they are, because we knew it in our community. That's why he ended up in training. He didn't, he should have been going to an XO position if they wanted him to be in charge of men in combat, he should have progressed his career in another manner instead of going to training. And so he says he went to training, but the writing was on the wall that you were not going to put up.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it, Eric. I mean, if you hated the SEAL teams, you would disappear, and there's no reason for you to be public and putting this pressure on yourself. And I get it that you're doing it because this is something that you care deeply about.
This is something that, and like we talked about with the show, that certain things within the community are the things that everybody points at as SEALs are bad, but SEALs aren't bad, and SEALs have done amazing things. And unfortunately, a lot of the amazing things that SEALs have done get overlooked by the things that we before the show we talked about Melgar, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But we talk about Chris Kyler, we talk about other things that. Not taking away from maybe the good things that Chris Kyle did do, but there were things that maybe he didn't do that were not so great.
What happened on that patrol that you started to mention that he went out on?
Jocko decides he gets shamed into going out, and of course he doesn't go out on a daylight thing. He goes on a helo insertion at night, and so when you guys know, you land, you got a brownout situation, and you're waiting for the dust to settle, see who you've alerted. You're not landing on the X. You're meeting up with somebody, a source, CIA, a source that's going to take you to the target where the bad guys are at. So the dust settles. Our source is there, and Jocko sees a guy with a slung AK, and he shoots him in the face, basically. Well, that just happens to be our source. That we're basically supposed to take us on target. So that's what happens, on his first day. That's that's why he got the term a murderous soul, because he shot somebody because he said he was going to do it, not that he was a threat, not that he was somebody who was just trying to make a name for himself. And so it was just ridiculous that he did it. Of course, you could say, well, he had a weapon. I felt threatened, It's just that Jocko didn't go out very often, didn't know exactly what the protocols
The
were.
link-up procedures were, yeah.
Yeah, and so he makes a huge mistake, and and a guy dies because of it.
And so they have to cancel
that's
the
the type
entire
of-
operation because of that, I imagine.
I'd have to ask exactly what happened. More than likely, I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah,
They said-
I don't
and so
Where are you going?
yeah, exactly. And so it's not it doesn't paint us in a good light, and that's just that's not normal. I mean, our guys before him had huge success on that same exact battle space, and so Jocko, that's why he gets pushed to training, and that's why now that he's pushed to training, and he's just like, you're not going to make your next advancement. And he goes, well, shit, I got to start lining up something for when I get out of the Navy. So that's when he starts Victory Gym. He teams up with a known drug felon, as far as him, and he gets in trouble because he teams up with enlisted guys, and they start trying to push contracts to his own gym. That's when I get involved with CQD. I'm just like, who the fuck is this Jocko guy on the West Coast, and why is he trying to get rid of CQD? As far as when his critiques are saying all these great things and all his guys are saying great things, well, it's because Jocko started up a gym and he wants contracts. And him and Tim Szymanski, so now we got East Coast and West Coast guys teaming up against putting a smear campaign against CQD and Dwayne Dieter, and a lot of guys don't know where, unless they talk to me personally or they talk to the CQD instructors, they don't know the whole background of what's going on. So they're just like, the team guys are just like, what direction are we going? What are we doing? Why are we getting rid of CQD?
It reminds me a little bit of like the I think it was Element 1 out at Dam Neck. And that resulted in a huge like IG complaint where it was like an insider baseball kind of deal where people within the unit were selling stuff, privately back to their unit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's as far as, so Tim Szymanski was trying to push contracts to his guy, on the East Coast, which was another gym, Lynx Academy, as far as Frank Cucci, another turd that tried to sell DVDs, like learn the secret fighting techniques of Navy SEALs and all this stupid, ridiculous stuff. This is who he teams up with on the East Coast. Jocko at his gym on the West Coast, and they're just put on this smear campaign against a true quiet professional who's at that time probably 18, 19 years of already training us, and with thousands and thousands of critiques of nothing but positive, great things. One of the most successful courses NSW ever had.
So how did it all pan out?
These guys were in leadership positions in training. They really had a lot of, basically pull on which way contracts went or who they went to. And so the guys are just busy operating, going overseas. They're not really worried about what's kind of happening on the training side of it. So a lot of them didn't even know that they were doing this. And so at some point, I run into the corruption so bad, and the CO on the West Coast, who was my CO, Spence, goes, hey, it's, Dieter's won the contract every time. I mean, every time it's gone up for bid, every couple of years or whatever, and he competes against these other people, it won by 50, plus points over the closest competitor. Tim Szymanski's guy, as far as was the lowest ranking one. As far as Jocko, because he was trying to push contracts to his gym, got found out and got exposed, and that's why he got the contract ethics fraud. So, he's still, now that he's failed on the battlefield as a SEAL leader, out there. Now he's failing as a training guy.
Yeah, unpack a little bit how that happened. You said that there was an ethical violation came up within NSW or Warcom. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, so at that point when, Spence says, hey, this is kind of going above him and the contracts are already won, he says there's some corruption. He didn't say corruption. He goes, I don't know what's going on above me, but if I were you guys, I'd file a fraud, waste, and abuse claim. So that's when, the CO basically, even though CQD had won all the contracts, they had to, they were still trying to get rid of it. Even though when it went up for evaluation, you had SEAL Team 6, you had every team put somebody in there to evaluate all these different things to make sure we were doing the right thing, even though we'd already been using it for like 18 years at that point. And everybody was already validated and super, and we're just getting further and further skill sets because Dwayne was training us to a higher and higher level. It goes up to 10. And so as we got more and more experience with CQD, we could get higher and higher levels. They tried to get, since they didn't win the contract, they tried to do away with all contracts as far as within NSW. And so they tried to, at that point, that's when I file an IG complaint against it. And that's where I named Tim Szymanski and I named Jocko, not knowing how screwed up they were at Roberts Ridge or Bruiser at the time. I just knew that these guys were pushing contracts to their buddies who, and they were selling a product that was going to get guys killed, or they weren't going to be as successful on the battlefield. They also didn't have any ethics as far as these guys that were training them, as far as Jocko was teamed up with a known drug felon. We were having drug issues in the teams. Tim Szymanski was teamed up with already a guy who sold the SEAL Trident brand, learned the secret fighting techniques of a Navy SEAL. So not very good quality people that these guys are.
Was that Frank? That was Frank Cucci?
Frank Cucci.
Yeah, I remember him. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, first off, I have to throw out, I would love to read a copy of that IG complaint if you still have it, Eric.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I'd love to read that. But so what was the result of that IG complaint when the investigators got involved?
So at that point, I had pushed out the IG complaint. It came back, as far as people in that chain of command, as far as it went to, I had to deploy to Iraq, so I went immediately to Iraq shortly after I filed it. And pretty much it stayed within NSW. And since it stayed within NSW, nothing really happened as far as I say nothing really happened. Jocko ends up having to get basically you retire at 20 or you're going to be court-martialed. Pretty much was his options as far as
they actually told them that you were going to be court-martialed if you didn't
that's
retire.
what I was told. He was told.
Okay.
From the knowledge I have, is basically he retires at 20. What kind of if he's such a stand-up SEAL and wants to operate in just like extreme ownership or whatever his crappy book is, whatever. A SEAL wants to operate. A SEAL wants to deploy.
Sure.
A SEAL wants to basically to get out at 20. The only reason you do that is because you're not happy with what's going on in the SEAL community, and you're saying, "I'm getting the fuck out of this canoe club." Me, I loved it. Would go back in and do it all over again, exactly the same, except for I would fight harder against Tim Szymanski and Jocko as far as because they were able to have success. And getting rid of CQD, and it's going to come back around. It's got to, because it's the most operationally effective training that we've ever had. And once they do, because they'll bring in the ethics, and we won't end up with the Melgar situation. We won't end up with Jocko's. We won't end up with Tim Szymanski, because that system exposes those guys. And when it exposes them, because they can't hide from the hood, and they find out what their sport-based stuff doesn't really have a positive effect in the operational world. And so those guys would be found out to either be psychopaths or a guy that can't control his anger correctly, because you end up with guys on steroids that shoot everybody in the room. And the amount of stress that CQD brings when you're doing the hooded box drill, it's as real as you can get, as close to combat as anything I experienced. I've had some hoods where I was more stressed out than hitting any target, in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Dieter, there was a lot of ethics incorporated into Dieter's program, correct?
Exactly. The last part of, so you had unarmed, so you had to handle yourself unarmed first. Then that went into armed. Now you got a gun and you got your kit on, how to properly respond to it. Then it got into prisoner control. Now that you've detained somebody, or you got somebody in your sights and they're being compliant, they're listening. Now you got to cuff them, search them, and transport them. Then it got into operation, got into shooting and some tactics as far as house entry and that type of stuff. Then it got into operational physical training, which is now that if you're going to use, how do you explain it? As far as, how like CrossFit is functional fitness.
Yeah.
Well, before CrossFit, we had OPTs, operational physical training. So that was those things, those skills, those physical exercise we did directly correlated to how you would perform striking, shooting, and doing prisoner control, all that stuff as far as was incorporated into operational physical training. Then now you got all these different skills. Now you hit what we call the internal warrior. What are you going to do with these skills that you have? You're a friggin' Navy SEAL and you're getting ready to go on the battlefield. And you can shoot and get away with it a lot of times, but is that the right thing to do? Are you shooting the right person? Are you shooting one of our own sources? So if you're trained to a high enough level, you can sit there and let the situation kind of evolve a little bit without shooting first, because you're that confident in your skills of what you can take that shot when you need to and remove somebody from the planet that needs to, but you could sit there and let it develop to where you're just like, okay, this guy's being somewhat compliant. Yeah. And just like, okay, now he's actually being fully compliant. Now we're going to, we can get a lot of good intel off this guy. So when you have these skill set, the ethical side of it is, yeah, you can go out there and shoot everybody you want, or you can sit there and do because you're going to live with that baggage the rest of your life. When you ask a warrior, just like, well, how many people have you killed? I hate it when somebody asks those questions to a Green Beret, Ranger, SEAL, because what they're going to remember is the one that they wish they didn't do. And so when you're trained to a lower level, you shoot sooner than you need to sometimes. And so what Dwayne's system did for us is that allowed us to basically have more success on the battlefield, because we could we were more mature. We had the internal warrior. We could dial it up as fast as we needed to protect ourselves and our buddies, but we could also let it mature to make sure we're making the right decision. And making those right decisions, when you come home 5-6 years later and you got all this baggage, you're just like of what happened on the battlefield. As far as that's when the internal warrior really becomes an important part. That's why we got the suicide situation that we have within the teams, because a lot of guys got mentored by Jockos or Tim Szymanskis and did some things, or Slab, on the battlefield, did stupid things on the battlefield that they're not happy about,
Or saw
and
some
now
things
they got that
they're
bag.
not happy about.
So
Go ahead.
Or I was just saying, or they saw some things that they're not happy about.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then that puts them in, and that
Yeah.
gets to a good point, because, for why am I coming so hard against these guys and exposing them? Why am I like, it's embarrassing to the SEAL community. It really is, that these guys, have been able to progress their careers and that they're put on such a pedestal. But if we allow these things to go unchecked and we let these guys get away with it, it produces other guys that do very similar stuff. And they think they can get away with even more different things. That's why you're talking about contracts going to their own buddies that within our community, it was who's got the most dirt on who, so that they could get a contract or get something, special to themselves.
So your IG complaint didn't really go very far, is what you're telling me.
Not as far as I wish it would have went, but Jocko does go away. As far as, and he was named in it. Tim Szymanski doesn't go away right away, but one of the great things, as far as when Matt Cole's book came out, Code Over Country, and I highly recommend. And I had nothing to do with that book. I wasn't down at Dam Neck. All his sources are stellar team guys.
I highly recommend watching his Team House interview, by the way.
Yeah. And I when I did my research on you guys, that was one of the ones I watched, and it was interesting because he talked about the hooded box drill a little bit, and he says that it was funny because the guys that basically failed in the hooded box drill, or they wouldn't go through it, they're afraid to go. And I had guys that would avoid it. Jocko, on his second time going through CQD, I got to go to dental. Just like, and that's the hooded box drill was what every team guy just loved doing. It was just like, it was testing your skills. And then we did a video review right after, of all because you go through individual first and you go unarmed, then we do a video review of it, of what success you had. All your teammates watch you against all the role players, how you performed going through, that drill, and you get all these, like, let's say anywhere from 11 to 15 scenarios of being attacked and how you handle it. So you get the with the one eye that tells no lie, the video camera, and which is great, because that's why the Predator feed is so important to Marcus Luttrell's story and Slab and all that stuff, because when those videos come out, it's just like it tells the real picture, and there's no hiding anymore. So just like the hooded box, you can't hide. And the video review slows it down so that you know exactly what mistakes you made, so that you don't make them again. And everybody loved it because it made them such a better operator. And the guys that made mistakes, it pointed them out, just like, okay, maybe that guy needs to be basically not the first guy in the train, or maybe he might be outside security or something, because he's shooting everybody in the room. And you remediate them. You basically say, hey, why, and so the ethical part comes into, play. Or if you're prisoner abuse, if you're, mishandling the role players because you feel like they got one over on you or something along those lines, you were able to ID those guys. Mm-hmm. And because you could ID them, you could point them out to the leadership, say, hey, keep an eye on them, or this, or they understood. You talk to them, we talk to them directly first, just like, hey, you understand, right? Why that's bad and why this doesn't, can have a negative effect, not only on your team, but it might be, you just shot the guy that we needed, or that had the information or something, because you were just overwhelmed by all these different threats that are in the room. And you decide to shoot more than you needed to shoot. You see that guy didn't have a gun. You see, in the video review, you can easily see who's a threat and who's not. And they're just, anyway. And so the hooded box drill does a great job of pointing out some of our psychopaths, and it makes us way better operators. And, and the instructors that were CQD instructors took their job so seriously, because what we were teaching those guys, they might use it tomorrow out in town, basically, or on a subway, or, or downrange in Iraq or Afghanistan. And you better make sure what you're teaching these guys is they got the best chances of succeeding and saving them and their buddies' lives.
Eric, you mentioned it briefly, and I would like to kind of put more of a point on it and talk about it a bit more, is Operation Red Wings. And, you mentioned it in regards to Tim Szymanski. I have to just preface the conversation a little bit to say that I do have some empathy for Marcus Luttrell as a junior guy in a firefight, and I'm hesitant. We do our after action reviews, right? But it's professional, not personal. And I do have some empathy for a guy who is in that moment and dealing with that. But there's this whole higher level of essentially cover-ups that we've been talking about. And there was a cover-up around Operation Red Wings. And that's something that I really just find kind of reprehensible.
Yeah, 100%. So let me I'll get to those points too.
Sure.
We'll back up a little bit, because, Marcus is going through BUD/S, and he's got a twin brother. As he's going through BUD/S and his twin brother, so when you're in first phase of BUD/S, if you get a day, or if you get even like 8 hours of sleep, or more sleep, because you got to be there so early and everything, to just basically to recover is a chore. That's why the attrition rate's so high, because you never really get a chance to recover a lot of times. You're just basically grinding and grinding. Every day is just, the times are getting less, it's getting harder. And so if you got 4 days to recover, that's huge. So his brother comes in and fills in for 4 days. And those instructors, if they would have known that Marcus was going to quit on the battlefield the way he did, and I understand as far as you think he's a junior guy, and and that, but the problem is that all his magazines were full. He ran down the hill and left his buddies. So I have a hard time forgiving him for that. Mm-hmm. He didn't respond as a guy that should have, that didn't get through BUD/S correctly, in my opinion, and And if those guys would have known that he would have quit on the battlefield the way they did, they probably wouldn't have let him graduate or get out of phase. They would have probably made him redo that whole phase. He might not be a SEAL today.
Wait.
So
Marcus
I had to get that out. Now I'll get. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, hold on. Marcus Luttrell had an identical twin brother who filled in for him.
Yeah, you didn't know this?
I
So
did not.
His brother's in Congress.
I did not. I don't keep up with.
He's a
like,
SEAL
all
too.
this. And was he already a SEAL when?
No, he was a civilian going through college, came down to visit his brother, and his brother was having a hard time. Marcus was having a hard time, and so he basically and his brother's in great shape, identical twin. What was funny about it was, Marcus was in the goon squad in the back. He was a slow runner, big guy, and all of a sudden his brother shows up and he's running up there where the instructors are at. And Marcus's Bud class is basically, hey, get back here. You're doing too good because you're fresh and got fresh legs and you're not injured or whatever. So the instructors never knew about it until almost the end of first phase. And so when it got exposed, they were just like, holy shit. They were embarrassed that it happened. They were just like, okay, we use a term, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Yeah.
And it's a bad saying. What they're trying to say is, hey, think outside the box.
Right.
It's not have your brother fill in for a period of time or cheat, or do something that's not ethical or not correct. We want you to get through buds. We want you to get through buds without steroids. We want you to get through buds, on your own merit. Yeah. And every instructor, when I went through, wanted as many SEALs, guys to get through it, but they wanted to make sure that you were the right mental fortitude to get through, and so when they found out about it, they were kind of put in this weird position: do we expose it or not? And they decided to kind of keep it under wraps.
It's funny because that is like if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, which is
if you get caught, you're not trying hard enough.
And that's the second part of that saying though it's only cheating if you don't get caught, and if you get caught, then oh well, like that's the second part of that saying, that's it's both admirable and also he got caught. That should have been.
That's not a huge issue for me per se.
I just wanted to get.
But
I wanted to, before you said, because he was a junior guy out on the battlefield.
Yes.
He'd already had an incident before that one that you guys don't know about, where he kind of did some stuff, and he wasn't fitting in well with his platoon. He was out chasing ass at the on base, hospital or whatever, because he was a corpsman. And so instead of prepping and their team also failed multiple, what they call, final training exercise, or, for SDV guys, it might be a little bit different, but they had failed it like 3 times, and they weren't taking their job seriously, for the most part. Marcus definitely wasn't. And now they're in Afghanistan. They get basically put on the side of a mountain. They get in their first firefight, and Marcus does exactly what, somebody who really wasn't really tested, and didn't really apply himself. He runs away from it with a fully loaded out, chest, harness and everything else, and leaves his guys behind. The situation might have been different if there was a solid team guy up there fighting with him. It might be a whole different story.
Right.
So it happens. You're right. So it happens, and then it's called for a QRF. The Red Wings gets launched in there. They get shot down by an SA-7. For some reason, the leadership didn't want. They were saying it was an RPG when it was just like, no. Eyewitnesses counts on multiple different people from different helicopters and different said no, it wasn't an RPG. But for some reason, they have to basically. The other team guys that were on the other helicopter have to basically say it was an RPG, and they, or anyway. So I don't know why they held that information, covered that up, and they shouldn't have, because that just exposed other helicopters that didn't know what they were doing, or that they were running into that situation.
I think that is the thing. You talk about this cover up, and and there are a lot of. very heroic and very capable SEALs, and I wonder at what level in the leadership, though, these cover-ups or these desires to hide the mistakes and hide these things dishonor everybody else. Because even with Chapman, I could be wrong, and you guys can probably correct me if I am, but I thought that Slabinski originally said that, he originally told a story that put Chapman in a good light, or that I didn't know, or whatever, and then Special Warfare Command basically came down on him, and his story changed.
No. So what originally happened was they talked highly about Chapman. He got
Right.
whatever the Air Force, like a Silver Star or something, a pretty high medal or whatever. He fought valiantly. He was just like awesome. But what Slab says is that he checked him. He said he was dead. And
Right.
that's why he left him behind. And well, he doesn't even get close to the body. He never checked, gets it. And so, Chapman might have been, so here's another thing. Chapman had gone through CQD training. All those guys have gone through CQD training. So he was well, trained as far as operating with us. He takes that machine gun bunker thinking those guys are going to be on his left and shoulder because
Right.
he's done entry. He's expecting them to respond with the training that he has had. And so he might have been just laying quietly trying to snipe somebody and didn't realize the SEALs were basically, a couple of them gotten hit and that they were escaping down the mountain. But later on, for whatever reason, Chapman basically starts fighting again. Some people said he might have been knocked out, but in my opinion, he was probably just laying almost ready trying to snipe somebody. And then when he finally got the shot, he probably did it. So he fought, for hours, after the guys escaped down the mountain. And it wasn't until the third helicopter came in where he exposed trying to protect that helicopter is when he finally gets shot and killed.
Yeah.
So he's on the first insertion where the helicopter crashes. Then he's basically on the second one where he takes machine gun bunkers, goes hand to hand fighting multiple different people because Slab convinced him not to take a pistol for whatever reason, or that's what I was told, as far as things that, that we learned after the fact that we would, you're going to take with you. And
Oh, he didn't have a
so
pistol?
Slab leaves them, and Chapman fights, by himself. And that's what, and we didn't, a lot of us knew bits and pieces of the story.
Yeah.
Didn't know the full details.
Yeah.
Until the Pred feed comes out and exposes it. And Chapman's, sister, basically gets with a PJ, writes the book. And there's a whole nother chapter that wasn't in the original book that I want to say it's chapter 17 or 27. There's a whole nother chapter that you should read about how Tim Szymanski tries to stop this his congressional medal.
Like in a revised edition of the book.
Yep.
Interesting.
They left.
Okay.
So they didn't want to be a SEAL bashing book. They just wanted to recognize their guy.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't realize that they, Slab and Tim Szymanski were going to put this, try to stop it and to be so they were trying to do the honorable thing by not exposing this part of it. They were just like, well, shit. If you guys are going to do that, as far as I wish they would have had it in there because it would have exposed our guys. It wasn't until Code Over Country exposes Tim Szymanski that he doesn't advance anymore. He might be in charge of JSOC today, and you'd have the super turd in charge of the most elite fighting forces on the world.
I'll tell you.
All because of
the whole. If you read the actual administrative procedures that Naval Special Warfare took, and I'm not even talking about Slabinski and Slabinski's testimony, because his testimony about Chapman changed from Chapman was this to Chapman was but when the Air Force looked at Chapman's award and went for the upgrade, the fact that the Navy and Navy Special Warfare, and this isn't Slabinski, this is above him, but the fact that they, you probably know more than I do, but the fact that the Navy initially they tried to block Chapman's upgrade after the facts came out of what he actually went through. They tried, who tries to block the upgrade of somebody's award, a different service. And then they said, we will give it to you if Slavinsky also gets it. To me, that was like,
Exactly.
that discredits the entire naval special warfare community. And there are a lot of good operators in the naval special warfare community.
Yeah.
But it's a blight.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. Everything you just said is exactly spot on, exactly what happened. And that's why I'm on here saying, hey, there's a bunch of us in our SEAL community that have been fighting these guys. I filed my IG complaint back in 2008, calling out this turd back then. Guys down at Deming should have held him accountable. He should have gotten shit canned right after that op. And then because he was able to stay in, then he messes up NSW even more because he tries to stop a Chapman award because it's going to expose him for a shitty leader that he was. And so instead of us holding our guys accountable, and I'm just like, this is like a warning order to, all active duty SEALs. Don't be a fucking turd.
Yeah.
Don't do these things like Chapman and Jocko because it's going to come out. The truth is always going to come out eventually. And if you're going to do these things, you're going to get exposed. And I hope these guys, they look at, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for Marcus. I feel sorry for Jocko. I feel sorry for Tim Szymanski to be that shallow and put your personal prestige or money above your teammates is as low as you can possibly go. And they got to look at themselves in the mirror, and they can't be happy with what they see. They can't be because
do you think though? Because I don't watch Jocko. I don't know Jocko. I don't know anything about Jocko other than what people say. I do know that there are people who say that, who he is now has like changed their lives, helped them out, things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a redemption arc for people, regardless of mistakes that they have made during service, or whether it's mistakes or shitty behavior? Like, I don't know. But do you think that there's a redemption arc for people?
Of course, if you make a mistake, as far as try to keep it in house, mistakes are made, guys learn from it and they move on, and they don't do the same thing over. My problem with like Jocko and like Tim Szymanski is that after the fact, it got exposed. They've been lying for years to the public of what actually happened. As far as, so like Chris Kyle worked directly under Jocko. He said he shot Juba. He said that he killed guys, looters in the dome in Louisiana. He said he's got all these false claims that have been found out to be. Well, you don't have Chris Kyle without Jocko. You don't have Jocko without Chris Kyle. So when Chris Kyle says he's not making a name for himself, he's got a book out there, so he has to basically say, yeah, he's on a book speaking thing, says, yeah, I knocked out Jesse Ventura. And just like total bullshit.
Right.
He said that he did these things. So now Jesse Ventura is like away. And because Jesse Ventura was one of the most well-recognized, well-respected SEALs, as far as congressmen in Minnesota, doing great things, represented us well. And so Chris Kyle hits him saying, I knocked him out, and tries to make a name for himself. Right. It's embarrassing. The same thing with Jocko and Tim Szymanski against, Dwayne Dieter. Dwayne Dieter is the quiet professional that they wish they could be.
Right.
And so they have to attack guys like that to try to make a name for themselves. And Jesse had to basically defend himself in court. And then you had other team guys piling on saying, oh, because Chris Kyle gets killed by a Marine. And karma, I don't know.
It's very sad. It's very sad regardless, Yeah.
Very sad, and just like the situation. But Jesse, as far as he's got to clear his name, he's already in court, and it's really him fighting against the media corporation that basically sold American Sniper, which we all find out that story's all bullshit.
Right.
So the media is trying to protect Chris Kyle, even though he's dead, because it's going to tarnish their book and their name and the movie and all that other type. and Jesse's just trying to clear his name. He's not going after the widow. He's going after the people that basically that supported Chris Kyle to do this in the first place. That kind of gets back to yours, Jack, as far as the people like with Marcus Luttrell. Marcus Luttrell fails and does some bad things on the battlefield, and could have recovered from it. Just like, hey, this is what I did wrong. But he gets the option is like, hey, it was over $3 million if you sign off on this book that was written for you. He didn't write it. And he just like, do you want to be known as the guy who ran away and left his buddies, or do you want to be known as the lone survivor that, basically this story and presents a look that makes NSW look better. And so he chooses to do that. So he has to sit there, go to these speaking engagements. He has to lie. And he got some bad, senior leaders within NSW basically pushed him to do this and to write that book. And that's where the story really needs to go. All these investigative reporters, there's a target-rich environment in the SEAL community to expose all this stuff. And the only reason I want it exposed is because so it doesn't happen again and it cleans us up. The reason why guys are talking to Matt Cole, Alpha,
David Phillips,
and all these books that are out there, Dave Phillips. The reason why all these guys are talking to those guys is because they've been trying to do it internal for a long period of time, and they're getting no results, and the corruption keeps going. And so the only way to clean it, unfortunately, is for us to go outside of it. And so that's why I'm talking with you guys tonight, and that's why I've been on the Green Beret Chronicles and Anti-Hero podcast, and I've been offered to go on, not on the Jocko's, and if you wanted to come on to yours and talk to me on yours, that'd be great. So I'm not shying away, but I'm not going to go on to going to go on to theirs, on these other ones that are out there. And there's a lot of guys that found religion all of a sudden, and they're and painting a picture like I'm redeemed and and all this stuff. It's like, well, how many team guys did you fuck up in the first place? Now that you've come out that I was a drug dealer and all this other things that or things that you did while you're active, but now you found Jesus all of a sudden. Which, hey, I'm a religious guy. I don't go to church. I just live by a moral compass that my grandfather taught me. And, and I say grandfather, but Buck Buckles, who I told you guys about, made me who I am, stand up for what's right. And I was only encouraged more and more by the CQD instructors and, Dwayne Dieter himself to stand up and, have a purpose behind your fight.
You had mentioned earlier about, like, if we say that 99% of the SEAL community are just solid stand-up dudes, but you were talking earlier about this culture, this small subset, but this culture of sort of, not necessarily blackmail, but I've got dirt on you, you've got dirt on me type of thing that happens amongst these individuals. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when we got into the ASOP world, first thing, Demneck, it kind of started down at Demneck with Tim Szymanski and, and who he basically kept promoting down there. So it's like Andy Stump says on one of his podcasts that he didn't see any of this corruption. He didn't see anything negative or whatever. But the one thing he said that where he saw corruption was the advancement in the awards. So if you control who gets the awards and you control who advances, as far as who do you think, are you going to put it, if you're Tim Szymanski or a Jocko, are you going to advance somebody who's got an ethical, a moral compass? No, you're going to promote somebody who's a turd that's like you, that's not going to basically say anything, or that you can control.
Right.
So with the ASOP world of stuff, as far as you learn how to get leverage over people.
Eric, for the viewers who don't know, ASOP, Advanced Special Operations and Tactics, is teaching special ops guys how to do source handling and skills that are more associated
kind
with the CIA.
Spook shit,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
But you learn how to basically get guys to do what you need them to do. Whether they do it because you motivate them or you do it because you got leverage over them in some sort. And so it's it could be we're all in the same fight together, we're all fighting the same cause, great stuff, or it could be like, hey, I'm going to tell everybody about. So just like with the Melgar situation, what they were going to do to him was fucking disgusting. And just like, and I can't imagine anybody ever doing that to somebody. And those, anyway, it bothers me that those guys did something like that and they thought they could get away with it.
We'll get into
so that's
that
the
next.
corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they use these ASOT type, skill sets and try to manipulate and try to get leverage over people. And so a lot of guys don't want to lose their trident. They don't want to get kicked out of the teams. So if you do something, bad, you're glad to get a lifeline and you're going to do whatever that person kind of needs for you. The problem is that the lifelines that they send to, that they'll give. So let's say you got a young guy that gets a DUI and he's definitely could learn from his mistake and kind of move on from it. But if they didn't think that they could control you, as far as they thought that your ethical, your moral compass, like, oh, sorry, you got to go, you shit can, sorry, you made a mistake. But if we got master chiefs over at Dam Neck that's got like 4 or 5 DUIs, so how many times do you get a DUI before you realize that, hey, you're just making mistake after mistake after mistake, and when it comes to tactical decisions, bad things happen, like extortion 17.
Yeah.
And so as far as the same guys that basically make these are the problems for the command that some people save end up causing huge problems, like extortion 17, Red Wings,
So
Roberts Ridge, Melgar.
So I hear you saying a couple things. One, like guys like Stumpf wouldn't have seen it because they weren't in the Bad Boys Club. Like they were kept out of that sort of loop where they would see the effects of it in the awards or whatever and the promotions, but they wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, I can't say that he didn't see it.
Okay.
And I don't know how I don't know how he would have missed it. And so honestly, yeah, I can't say.
And then we have other situations like extortion 17 where these competent heroes end up dying because of a poor leadership decision, and then that leadership doesn't get punished for it, they get promoted.
Exactly. So to hide their mistakes, the guys that were that are there that might basically tell on them, they give them high awards with V's and basically just like, yeah, it was a bad mistake, we learned from it, and they cover it up with awards. So our biggest mess ups, our biggest failures have got some of our highest awards. Congressional Medal of Honor for somebody, come on. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So
if you imagine if it's at that level, can you imagine all the smaller, Bronze Stars with V's that are out there? And that's another target-rich environment for the investigative reporters to figure out, just like, well, how many awards did Naval Special Warfare get? Because if you got it, you wanted to earn it. And you basically, and I think you should fucking wear it proudly. But if you didn't, it's something, and you did it just keep your mouth shut. That's something that needs to be,
So what?
Because of that situation ends up to other guys not, same things happen to them. Red Wings turns into extortion 17.
Right. So what is like? First off, I think you're very brave because I don't know, like I never saw any of this stuff when I was in the Ranger Battalion or when I was deployed or stuff like that. Like I never saw. Had I seen it, I don't know if I would have. I don't know if it's the moral fortitude. I don't know. I don't know if I would be like, well, shit went down, stuff happened, and I'm gonna cross that. In the cops, it's the thin blue line. Like I'm gonna cross that because there is. Yeah. Because you don't want to, at least for me, I'll say, like it's tough to throw the entire brotherhood to the wolves when it was just a few people. And what's an operator who's still on the job, who's still doing it supposed to do when they want to keep operating, but they know that if they do come forward, that it'll probably be the end of their career?
Yeah, so I think it could be. In 2008, I did my IG complaint.
Right.
But I didn't retire until 2016. And
Right.
I made multiple deployments after that. So for me, getting the truth out there and knowing where you stand basically encourages other people basically to do the right thing.
And
get out there.
retaliation is also illegal, by the way.
Yeah. And just like, here's another thing. And how did I get here? Because I never had a platform, and I don't have a platform. I'm on your platform. But I was watching, somebody told me, said, hey, this guy, Matt Kubler, who basically did a thing on Joe Price. Joe Price was my task unit commander before he became the SEAL Team 4 commander. He did an XO and then commander there. So I know Joe Price personally. I worked for him directly. And there's no way, when I was told, in Afghanistan, that he killed himself, I'm just like, there's no way Joe Price would ever commit suicide. It doesn't make any sense. This is all bullshit. What's the real story here? Knowing that, there's a little bit of, some guys in our community. And then I would listen to Matt Kubler's, podcast that he did on, I don't know if it's Green Beret Chronicles or Anti-Hero, whatever one it was on. I watched it and I was just like, I fucking knew it. And this is a civilian who is just his high school buddy, who is basically, the parents know that Job didn't kill himself. And they're trying to get the real story. Matt Kubler just happens to be a marshal who investigated suicides and knew a lot about it. Just happened to be Joe Price's high school buddy. And so he goes through the investigation and shows how there's no way Joe Price could have killed himself. And I'm just like, I fucking knew it. And here's a civilian that's basically, calling it out. He's got more mental fortitude than a lot of the team guys that are basically. And I was just like, how can I stand by and not basically? And I said, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, Matt. I think you hit the the nail on the head there. And goes, if you want to do a podcast and expose any stuff, it goes, I just happen to know the anti-hero, Tyler and Brent, and then then Jay later on. And Jay's been, they've all been great. Jay's been phenomenal. And so that's how the ball got rolling. And it's not that I'm happy I'm doing it. Not that I'm, as soon as I can go back into, going away into the sideline, that's why I'm not going to do my own stuff. I'm not trying to brand myself. I'm not trying to do anything other than expose to America that we got some turds. Don't put them in leadership positions. Don't follow them, for these reasons, and be aware that, like when Jocko does a podcast, he sits there and reads from a script. When he did the one rebuttal against me, like 434.5 or whatever, him and the other guy are sitting there, they're flipping the pages at the same time, reading the same script. And they don't even address, Jocko didn't address that he warned his guys that the SEAL Team 6 operator came in there before Mark Lee got killed. Before Mark Lee got killed, he said, hey, don't do this stupid shit. Then Mark Lee gets killed. And then he says, guy goes in there and says, you should be fucking court-martialed and shit can. He says, fuck it, I'm taking it to the enemy. He got no empathy for his guys. He didn't give a shit about his guys. And so for people to put him up on a pedestal and think that this is a leader that we should follow or get behind, I bet you if, investigative reporter, and this is my, because I don't know anybody, how to do it. If you could figure out if his books are plagiarized, I bet you they're all plagiarized. I bet you it would be, I don't know that for sure, but my opinion is because he's not a good leader. He was never a good leader. He's never been a good business operator. He teams up with a drug dealer, to open up his gym. He starts, echelon front trying to teach businessmen how to run a business. He's never run a business. All he does, the only thing that he's done is been able to scam the public on his persona. And he's got a great voice, talks like Batman, blah, blah, blah. He's a big meathead. And so anyway.
Eric, I would like to get into the death of Melgar because I feel like like you, I suppose, I've been telling people about some of this stuff for like 10 years. And I'll tell you, 10 years ago, people looked at me like I had a dick growing out of my forehead when I talked about this.
Yeah.
They were like, you are crazy. Like, you are just batshit delusional. Here we are a decade later, and a lot of stuff has come out, and I think people are much more primed. They're much more open to understanding that, we have a problem. And even the chief of Naval Special Warfare, I think, said in a memo, we have a problem. So we've at least gotten to that point. And Melgar, I mean, one of the frustrations I encountered in the veteran community was that a lot of people, when I would bring up some of the war crimes, they'd, it's this sort of like racist attitude of like, well, fuck them, they're Muslims, they're brown people, whatever, which is pretty angering. But then, okay, we start tracing the ethical and moral lapses, and that goes on and on and on, and that gets us to the point where we as special operators are murdering one of our own, which is Melgar in Mali. And I don't know, I mean, if that's something you're going to defend, you are just a despicable, reprehensible person. I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. So I would like to hear your, what you know about Melgar's death and what happened there.
Unfortunately, I don't know much about that one. So that was, some guys down at Deming, and so I'll tell you if I know more information, but other than they were found guilty and that they, did something they shouldn't have done. And anyway, I wish I had more information, but I am as equally disgusted by it, especially finding out what they intended to do to him before they they killed him, accidentally or whatever you want to say it. It definitely was not. That's not a fucking hazing when you do when you're planning to do something like that.
What I've read, and I also don't have like inside information per se, but what I've read about it is that Melgar became aware that some of the other guys were using the op fund to pay sources. They were embezzling some of that money, and he was not happy with it. And these other guys concocted this scenario where they're going to, essentially sexually assault him in his barracks room. And in the process of them
taping him up and holding him down.
They choked him out until he expired
on accident. Yeah.
And that's, doing the rear naked choke as far as inappropriately not doing, because this guy was a mixed martial arts guy that's, anyway, when you're in that type of a fight for your life, you fight for if that's going to happen to you, you're going to fight so fucking hard to make sure that doesn't happen to you. So Melgar fought fucking valiantly as long as he could, but there was, it was 2 SEALs and multiple Marines that were basically, that was in that situation. And that what's bad about it is that those Marines were probably honorable guys thinking that, didn't know to the extreme that they were going to take this to, or I would hope they would never have. Yeah. They were just like, maybe, hey, these are SEALs and, thinking that they're,
we do haze each other quite a bit.
Yeah.
But there are limits, right? There are lines.
Yeah.
And this clearly crossed some big ones.
Yeah.
Anything penetrating is fucking.
I was going to say the same thing. Paint or markers and tape are fine. But penetration of any type is probably we'll just say it's a step too far.
Yeah, that's a way. It's criminal.
Yeah,
and I would kill somebody. I would fight that hard to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry. So I'm apologizing to you guys because that should never happen. These guys should have, that stuff should have been ID'd. They should have never been put in those positions, to where they had those funds that they felt like they would basically could take advantage of that situation. They weren't mature enough to handle that responsibility, representing the United States in a foreign country with U.S. taxpayer dollars, thinking that they could buy hookers and drugs and do whatever. And then when they get exposed, they're like, oh shit, I'm just going to do something really extreme and sickening on top of this.
There's a challenge in the special operations community, and this isn't just SEALs, this is all special operations, that we all love, I'm making a general statement here, but I think that we all, to some degree, embrace the hooligans and brigands type of mentality and label. But there's also when it's just outright theft and crime and fraud and, like hooligans and brigands, we mean it in a very sort of, I think, lighthearted manner.
Yeah.
That yes, the lines aren't always so clear. Yes, but if it's for personal enrichment, like everybody steals like 100-mile-an-hour tape from Supply for their squad or for the for their team.
If you mess something up on target, you may have been 100-mile-an-hour taped to a stretcher or something like that, right?
But there's this idea of being hooligans and brigands, but I think that it is when it's not like morally reprehensible and it's for the team, but the idea when it's for personal enrichment is when that idea goes too far. So when you're taking ops funds, when you're trying to finagle contracts, through dubious means, when you're stealing shit from the supply locker and selling it on eBay, that is not the hooligans and brigands mentality that goes along with special operations.
100% agree.
Yeah, and again, it's like hazing. I think hazing is an important part of sort of the special operations legacy because it's sort of like it's in a way a rite of passage. It's also like seeing if a guy can take the stress and pressure of it and still and not, because there's a lot of stress and pressure in combat. And if you can't take the stress and pressure of hazing, can you trust him in combat? Which is also why hazing really, for a lot of units, sort of went away during the GWAT, because now it's like everybody's going to be in the stress and pressure of combat anyway. So what's the point of taping him to a tree and pulling down his shorts,
Do we want to take some pictures? Questions for
we'll
Eric?
take pictures too.
Pictures, yeah.
But yeah,
I bet I got a bunch of questions. I can only imagine. We covered a lot of topics.
I'm going to pull some up too.
So Eric, with this, because I know you've gotten a lot of criticism about, being a Jocko hater or being a SEAL hater or being this or being that. From talking to you, it seems as though you're just trying to bring light to these situations for a small percentage. For a small percentage of the community.
We've got a lot of hate mail within my community, which I didn't. As far as a lot of guys are just like, thank God you're doing this, and thank God you're coming out. As far as I know, it's embarrassing and it kind of hurts us as this, but everybody knows it already. It's already out there. You guys all know, this. There's little information that I've amplified for you, but everybody knows it, and so we got to own it ourselves. And this is us owning it. And they're just and a lot of them, they're in the military contracting thing. They're just, a lot of them wish they could come out and do exactly what I'm doing. I don't have to rely on anything, for my living from NSW or military or anything else like that. I'm living my best life and having a great time.
Eric,
I'm not happy I have to do this, but I think it's important to do it. And I got to look at myself in the mirror, and all the good team guys, the group of us that are calling us the true brotherhood, want this to come out, and we want to expose it. That's why Code Over Country is so successful. That's why Alpha, it's a cry for help. Yeah. And if NSW is not going to do it themselves, then us prior frogmen and active duty frogmen, we're going to go to investigative reporters and get it cleaned up. And I encourage it to happen, because until that happens, we're not going to be the SEAL teams that we used to be. And I want the SEAL teams to be the SEAL teams that used to be, because we're solid professional guys. And there's 90% of the SEALs are just great fucking dudes crushing it out there. And we got a 10% that's just fucking destroying us. And unfortunately, there are a lot of them in leadership positions.
Eric, this question we got in kind of speaks directly to this. Christian asks, I would like to know what your objectives are by spreading this message. Is it that you simply, 1, want to prevent Jocko's book sales, 2, want to state that Jocko's message is wrong, or 3, is it that Jocko is simply the wrong messenger? And he says, I'm not a Jocko fan in the slightest, but Jocko did come back with a 20-hour response, so I just wanted Eric's thoughts.
Yeah, so I could care less, about his books and what he does and all that type stuff. My thing is that I just wanted to expose him for what he is, because when he does go off the rails or he does do something here in the future, that's because it's his tendency. He failed multiple different times. He's going to do something. Once I come out with this, I bet you there's going to be like 20 people that work for him are going to say, well, guess what? Jocko did this. Jocko did this. So it's going to come out eventually. It's just that I'm, getting in front of it and saying, hey, he doesn't represent the SEAL community. He never represented the SEAL community correctly. And just because you guys got duped doesn't mean that, it happens to the best of us. And if you just watch him, you'll find out like, holy shit, Eric's kind of spot on this, calling him out the way I am.
I got another question here. This one is actually a very in-depth question about Iran. Is that a particular focus for you, or something that you're prepared to speak to?
Iran?
Yeah.
I wouldn't know much, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Other than we did. A funny. Well, no, never mind. I won't get into it on the boardings.
A funny story? Come on.
Well, we accidentally took down an Iranian ship, one of those operations, and we had to get off of it really quick. But I do have the flag from it.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, MD, who asked this question. This is like a super specific, in-depth question about Iran, and I don't think Eric's prepared to anser that. Dave, what do we got on the YouTubes?
So, M. Corbin, thank you very much. He says, you're a sexual Tyrannosaurus Rex, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Corbin. I'm not sure who that was.
Is he talking to you, or
I think
who's he talking to?
I think it's for D. I'm not sure, but thanks.
Thanks, M. Corbin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just imagining the small arms trying to get it on.
No, seriously, paleontologists, they think the little arms, no one knows what they were for.
Yeah.
But there's a theory that it was for mounting the female.
Oh, just to hook on? There you go.
True story.
Yeah, there you go.
Fun fact for you out there.
I heard it here today.
Anonymous, thank you Anonymous, thank you very much. What advice would you give to women that want to be Navy SEALs? A woman made it to day 4 of Bud's first phase this year, but she quits.
So I'm a little conflicted, because it does change the dynamic of the guys around you when you got a female around you. So so we had the female engagement teams, which were, they crushed it on the battlefield. They did great things, and we had solid operators. I just don't know if it should be the same pipeline, as far as, going alongside the guys. I think they can make it, a women's side of it, equally as challenging, as demanding, but be all around women. I'm kind of conflicted on it, because I think there's a huge positive to having them along with you on a lot of operations. And, but I don't know how the interaction with the guys around her, going through training would be.
Would you say, though, for women, the advice would be this: to get through a selection, the advice would be the same for the guys. Be in shape and don't quit. Suck it up.
Yeah, well, you could, and honestly, I think anybody that wants it bad enough can get through BUDS, as far as it matters how bad you want it. And, when I was going through BUDS and we had to sit there and tread water with the double, aluminum 80s on my back, and I was an experienced diver, I'm just like, I said, fuck it, I'm just going to drown. I'm not going to quit, because we're treading water and you got guys pulling you underwater, and, it's a beehive situation. Everybody's kind of panicking a little bit, because everybody wants it, but you've been treading water for now 15, 20 minutes with these huge fucking tanks on your back. And you're just like, I'm exhausted. I can't. I'm just like, so I had made decisions. I said, screw it, I'm just going to drown and go underwater. And the instructors are going to come in and save me. I'm not quitting, though. But that was the dedication, that I was willing to drown myself Not that you have to do that. It was just I don't recommend it. Luckily, it didn't happen. I got to the bottom of the pool and I didn't like it down there either. So I came back up one more time, and that's when they secured us.
Yeah.
But I was willing to drown. But
Yeah.
I'm saying, so I don't. It's like in high school, I was a little better than an average athlete. I broke my high school record for the most tackles or what. We had a great, I peaked in high school because I had a great high school, football career. But I'm saying I wasn't, when I showed up to do the first diving screening test or whatever, and the SEAL motivator was basically said, all right, you got to swim this, distance, and you got to use the side stroke or the breaststroke. And he goes, if I see your hands come out of the water and I point to you, get out of the pool because you failed. I'm like, how in the hell do you swim without your hands coming out of the water? That's how kind of stupid I was or ignorant I was. And so you can learn all that stuff as far as to get better at it, get better running, better. That's all that's trainable. It's the mental side of it that you just you're going to do what it takes. You're going to prep yourself. You're going to prepare. You got to do all the drown proofing stuff. It's going to be second nature to you because you've done it 100 times. It is not like the first time you do it is when you're out at Buds. So all this stuff is known, what you should do to prep for it, and it should be to get through. And we should have huge success getting through because everybody knows what you need to do to get through.
Somebody asked, I don't know, I don't follow sort of military, the drama and what, I don't know anybody, but somebody asked, somebody said that Don Shipley had a response to you. What did you think of his response? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either. I didn't see a response.
Okay.
I think what I have heard is there's a lot of, because he calls out phony SEALs.
Right.
And so you got a lot of guys out there. So what's worse to me is you got a guy claiming that he's a SEAL that's in this, small little bar somewhere or doing, somehow he's got some accolades saying he's a SEAL and he's not. And he's been able to benefit from it, but it's on a small thing. What's worse to me is a Tim Szymanski, who is a Navy SEAL, and he uses his rank and he uses his position to try to stop Chapman from getting a fucking Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
So what's worse, Tim Szymanski or a guy claiming him he's a SEAL over here?
In a bar to get a free drink. Yeah. Yeah.
Or to get laid,
Yeah.
as far as it's childish, it's just okay, this day and age, since the global war on terrorism, we're actually in war, that shit doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Most guys aren't going to out there doing it or whatever. And if they do, it's another person I feel sorry for. Because it's just oh my God, you got to look yourself in the mirror.
Magnus Rudd, thank you very much. Is Regimental Reconnaissance Company officially a part of JSON?
I'd have to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can check Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the Marines are awesome.
Yeah.
And every time I've worked with them, I've been around them, as far as some of the most stand-up, solid guys. The two Marines that came on, that spoke, what they saw from Task Unit Bruiser while they were there, just solid, great guys. And they did it because they were just doing the right thing. And they do it. And those are just two of the Marines of the many that basically have spoken to me since then. And since I've done these podcasts, there's people reaching out to our network of not only me, but multiple other SEALs and exposing more and more stuff. So if you're a team guy and you don't like what I'm saying, it's probably because you're one of the turds that need to go away. If you're not, and you're just and exposing, just I'm helping you out by basically trying to make sure this stuff, these guys like Tim Szymanski and Jocko don't get in charge of men that get them killed. Both those guys got good SEALs killed because of their poor leadership and their poor decision, and they didn't care about their guys' lives that they put out there.
Joe's gotcha. Thank you very much. Do you think because of how big and successful the SEAL brand has become that it's attracting the wrong type of candidates into the teams?
100%. Well, somewhat, yes. Because a lot of people don't know that the ones that the branders, the people that are out there branding it, aren't it's not our quiet professional good guys. The ones that are willing to go out and to do this type stuff, and now me being one, kind of out there doing it, but I'm not doing it for any personal benefit. I'm not trying to brand myself. All I'm trying to do is expose the branders that are doing it so that other people don't do it. So yes, if we got guys that are getting into the teams thinking that they can become a movie star or do podcasts or write books, do one platoon and then write a book about being a Navy SEAL. Yeah. And so that's what, the investigative reporters need to, just like all these books that came out, SEAL books, who backed them? Who backed Lone Survivor? Who backed, American Sniper? Who are the puppet masters that are controlling Marcus Luttrell right now doing a podcast, Team Never Quit? I mean, the worst slap on the face is the guy that quit on the battlefield is now got a podcast who is, Marcus isn't capable of running that himself. There's puppet masters that are controlling Marcus and making him make some bad decisions and not expose what he's doing, trying to make money. And then you got all the false awards, and these guys do speaking engagements. If you get Congressional Medal of Honor and come speak at your event, it brings some clout that you could bring in somebody of that. Well, if it's a false award that this guy is getting money for, just like who promoted that award and who's getting a kickback from promoting that award?
Well, and then you have the majority of the guys who, people like Red, who, you will probably, hopefully we hear from him someday. Hopefully he comes out and tells his story, but
he's drinking Mai Tais on the beach somewhere.
But yeah, or growing weed or doing whatever whatever he wants to do. Like he's you have people, and there are so many of those guys out there. And look, there's nothing wrong with developing a public persona. I mean, Jack and I both have public personas. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just there's so many guys out there who are just content to live their life and not. Mm-hmm. Or you have somebody like what's that podcaster? Is it Mr. Ballin? Who he was a SEAL. He was a SEAL, but he just does weird shit videos, like creepy stuff or cool stuff. Oh, yeah, okay. And it's not about.
I don't know who it is, but
but I'm saying that
sounds like he's not representing us too well, though.
No, he's great. He's great. What I'm saying though is that it is interesting. For instance, I think the people that really build their brand on what they did and not taking anything away from that, because if you did it, you deserve it, and you have to make a living. And if you went to Harvard, you're going to tell people you went to Harvard, right? Like there's nothing wrong.
If it's true and it was all accurate information, I support it 100%. If you're not giving away TTPs or SOPs, and you're not exposing, people that you're not supposed to be exposing, and you're just telling a story that's interesting, that we need heroes. We need guys that represent the community correctly and did the right thing on the battlefield, did the right thing in life, did the right thing in training. And those guys, I got no problem with them doing and capitalizing on their experience in the team. So that's great. And if they wrote a book and it's accurate, great. Good on them. Like Kyle Mullins. The SEAL wrote a great book. Not Kyle Mullins. I'm sorry. He was the SEAL or the candidate got killed. I'm mixing up things. Milligan. And sorry about that.
Ben Milligan.
Ben Milligan.
Sorry about it. Kyle should have been a.
We've had Ben
on. And he's a great.
Okay.
I mean, we wouldn't have a show if people weren't willing to share their stories, and sharing their stories is an important part because it's like. These histories need to be told. They need to be remembered. They need to be accessible.
And I'm pretty sure he was at Team 4 with me, and he was a good operator. So as far as, on top of being a good author, he was a good operator. So he's a good dude. So I'm glad that he's having
we love
success.
Ben. Shout out, Ben. We love you, man.
We'll even let you come back, even though you were a SEAL.
Yeah. Since this podcast.
That brings up a great point. There are great guys out there that are SEALs doing great stuff.
There are.
I know it. I'm bashing I'm bashing some of them, but it's a small percentage, and that's what's,
Right.
and unfortunately, the public has put this small percentage because they're willing to brand themselves in a false way, and I'm just bringing light to, hey, they didn't do what they said they did when they were active duty.
It's also interesting what like people pick up on or when they pick a side, because like when when we talked about Eddie Gallagher, right? And people are like, oh, you guys are bashing SEALs. It's like, well, but there were SEALs who testified against them. So which side are we on?
Which veterans are we supporting?
Which veterans are we supporting? And which SEALs do we hate? Do we hate Eddie Gallagher? Do we hate the SEALs that were testifying against him? Like, we don't hate any veterans. It's like we just want to explore the truth.
So for that many guys to band together to call out their leadership as far as Eddie Gallagher, that speaks volumes to me.
Right.
And one guy's word over this many, many other guys, and then knowing what it takes to call out your own, and
Right.
actually gone down that trail.
Yeah.
I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
And I know that it ruined their careers, as far as that, a lot of them got out because they were just like, screw this, I'm an honorable guy and you guys are bashing me for standing up and doing what's right. And
Right.
just like, and you guys are taking this guy's word over mine, and just like not taking Jesse Ventura's word over Chris Kyle. Now everybody knows what a liar Chris Kyle was, but at the time there were so many team guys bashing Jesse, and it was unjust, uncalled for, and it was sick. It's bullshit.
Right.
Because he's was an honorable frogman that basically did great things for us. So I got no, after reading Alpha, I kind of have to, and when in the book and it's well sourced, or he would have been sued, as far as it would be, so it's a well sourced book in my opinion. And when the EOD guy gets shot and can die, and they, instead of calling for a medevac to that spot, they hide where they're at. They basically transport him all the way back with a chance of him dying, and
Right.
just like over because he doesn't want to get exposed for doing something that he wasn't supposed. That's where the line was drawn for me.
That was when they left their
as far
Blue
as-
Force trackers behind, right? So that nobody
they
knew
turned
where they
them
were.
off.
Yeah.
And you just
Yeah.
like, and especially with close-in air support, and you just like, and how easy it is to misidentify a group, and just
Yeah.
like, so those guys could have gotten blown up, by our friendly fire easily.
Yeah.
And that happened even on Jocko's deployment. They got, blue on blue situations because they're doing stupid shit,
Yeah.
not telling everybody what they're doing. And those guys are all talking about that stuff too.
Brady Good, thank you very much. Has Eric seen Men of Honor with Cuba Gooding Jr., and is it his favorite or second favorite Navy diver movie?
It's I don't know of any other Navy diver movies, but it's an awesome one.
Well,
It's
you have
just
the
like,
Abyss, but
the
that
mental
was SEALs
fortitude
too.
that-
Yeah.
Say again?
I said you have the Abyss,
it's
but I
an
think that
awesome-
was more Navy
Yeah.
SEALs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. So Navy SEAL with Charlie Sheen, or the diver movie with
Cuba,
I would
yeah.
go with the diver movie.
No, Carl
It's-
Brashears was a true hero, and I think he died recently, like within the last 15 or 20 years. I think
you're right.
out in New Jersey,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
I
not
think
sure
it was he was a true hero for sure. And if you
Yeah,
have not
I
seen
agree
Men of
on
Honor, you definitely need to, because it's an amazing movie, and it's a true
Yeah.
story.
It's funny because I got it's a replica, but I got a Mark V dive helmet. It's because I love my Navy diving career. As far as you should see, I purposely don't put all the paddles and plaques, and
Yeah.
I do it with this thing behind me. But I got a lot of cool memorabilia stuff that I just cherish.
Yeah.
And my Mark V dive helmet, is one of them, and it's I'm pretty proud of.
I
the
unfortunately
different
lost
things.
my plaque with the old Mark V dive knife. I had a plaque, when I left with
Yeah.
one of those, and those are almost impossible to find now. But
Yeah, I got one of those too, and I got it. So I was telling you earlier about my Navy dive buddy Ted, and we were both high school buddies. He became a Navy diver. I became a Navy diver, and but he gave it to me because, when I was telling you, he did a lot of stuff with subs, and they would be inside subs sometimes, and some of the lockout things so you could bang on.
Yeah.
Signal with
This
it.
is a screwing motion. It's like in this
That's
heavy
your story?
brass. It's a heavy brass
it's a
round.
The kind of
huge brass-
the kind of
It's a heavy
corkscrew
yeah,
motion.
It's
that
a
you're
heavy
doing?
brass round sheath with
You got
like,
your
with
story.
a knife
You
that,
got your
like,
story
screws
down,
in.
Dave. You got
Yeah.
your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a cool night to have.
Yeah. Kyle P, thank you very much. Has the relationship between NSW and AFSOC improved after the Chapman Medal of Honor?
Probably not. I mean, I think the way we handled that and didn't call out our guys as far as, and I'm hoping this will start to repair that situation, because I'm telling you right now, it should never have happened. And unfortunately, we didn't weed out people that we should have earlier to make sure that stuff didn't happen. It's embarrassing to our community 100%. And I apologize for my community.
That is, if we don't have anything else on Patreon.
No, I think that's all we got.
Patreon questions.
There's more?
Patreon.
I asked them.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I think we might have one more.
Well, God damn it.
Sorry. From Sean.
Oh, okay. I got it. Okay. From the outside, it seems like SOF attracts the most true believers in service. In addition to weeding out psychopaths, etc., did you spot an excess of patriotism, or however you would describe it, and try to correct it? Thank you for sharing these insights.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Yeah, I don't know what an excess of patriotism is, other than if you get so far out above over your skis that you're losing track of reality. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what he was.
I don't think you can have. I don't know how you could have too much patriotism. As long as you're justified in your actions, your escalation of force, you're doing things correctly to the threat that's presented, and you're doing it for America. As far as I can't think of it, I've been to a lot of other countries in the world, and by far we're the best. And I love America, and I would go through everything I've gone through exactly, almost identical. SEAL community, I think it's the greatest community out there. It's just the most solid guys that you ever want to go be in a wartime situation, have on your shoulders, left and right and behind you, is that I never had to worry. The guys that I did platoons with, the guys that I were in task unit for, I never had to worry about what they were doing. I knew they controlled their zone of responsibility. They knew I had mine, and that we could, we did great things, and we were all solid guys. And so, all the platoons I did were great, and I
Dave,
loved them.
Do you want to tease out Friday's episode?
Yes. So on Friday, we are having
Pat O'Donnell.
Yeah, we're having Pat O'Donnell back. Thanks. With his book Unvanquished, which is about special operations during the Civil War. President Lincoln's attempt to the special operations, the attempt to find Mosby's Rangers, like a lot of very cool stuff. I haven't finished the book yet, but I will. It's getting a ton of great reviews. And I know Pat was researching this. We've had Pat on before. He's a historian, author, and I know he was researching this book for a really long time. So if you want to hear about Spec Ops way back in the day,
And we haven't had Pat on the show in like 3 years or something, 3.5 years. So
check him out on Friday. Eric, thank you so much for spending your Friday night or Monday night with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope so. For the people out there that, especially if you're people that are going to start bashing me because of this, it happens. As far as I read the comments, I respond to a lot of them, especially if they're just kind of pissing me off. But and they shouldn't bother me, but some of them are just so childish and so whatever, and those ones I'll ignore. But ones that come from I can tell comes from a team guy who's trying to paint a picture. At least don't be a pansy ass motherfucker and put your name on it. I'm putting my face out there, and I'm willing to stand behind what I'm saying. Don't be a piece of shit and basically make a comment as being like coming from you're an operational team guy, as far as without putting your name on it, So anyway. I'll stand behind what I'm saying, stand behind what you're saying, and that's when most of them won't do it. So,
if you're open to it, maybe on our Patreon, we could put the IG complaint, and
I'd be happy to.
Maybe some of the course reviews, if you're open to it.
Yeah. No, I'll put some stuff together as far as some after actions, as far as the critiques of some of the key guys that basically that talk shit, or that might say something negative.
I'll shoot you my email.
I'll tell you, honestly, the biggest travesty that is happened because of Jocko and Tim Szymanski is when they got rid of CQD.
Yeah.
And just so that everybody out there, as far as that's active duty right now, Dwayne is still training everybody, he's selective, and is still quite a professional, but he's got a training site with kill houses and 300 whatever acres of property of long ranges. And he's still busy as he can possibly be. He does a lot of great stuff for kids and, a heroes program. He's still crushing it up there, and we need those ethics brought back into NSW. And he doesn't give a shit. He'll start training tomorrow if people reach out to him, like ourselves, that need that training. And I'll tell you right now, it is life-changing, life-saving training, and that's why it was for 22 years, and why these two turds had to get rid of it, because it exposed them for being turds.
Well, it's interesting because what was that old video? Because like when you mentioned like Frank Kuchar, like I know the teams trained under like Vunak or the JKD stuff, and and then Frank Kuchar, but a lot of those guys were coming out with those. Was it Panther videos? What was the video company that you'd see in Soldier of Fortune and Black Belt magazine?
There were a few,
but they would always have those huge like page ads about the secret hand-to-hand techniques of Navy SEALs, and they'd be like armed with only a knife, and I'd be like, why would they go into combat armed with only a knife? But
the tactical failures of just like, how did you end up in that situation in the first place?
Yeah.
Just like so it's when you get into the operational world and you start understanding what's operational and what's not, you quickly find out that, why in the hell would I be doing? Why would I be carrying a hatchet, going on target? As far as it doesn't.
No tactical sense.
There's a lot of not. It looks cool, and I don't know if some of you, but. You quickly realize there's no tactic. When we are trying to shred ounces on our body armor, and we're trying to make us, because we got to carry all this stuff, and you're carrying a 1 or 2 pound friggin' something that's not tactically sound to use. When you would ever have to use it, you've made so many tactical infractions that you probably shouldn't have a gun in the first place, in my opinion.
So I'll tell you that I carried a tomahawk my first few ops because I grew up and like idolizing the LERP guys, and the guys in Vietnam that like, carried stuff like that because there was an operational use for it in Vietnam for those guys. But in my mind, I had it. That was what I thought. I also have mentioned before that I had a magazine full of tracers because they did. The tracers got me almost shot the fuck up because it told the enemy exactly where I was. And it's unnecessary in a time when you have IR lasers. And the Tomahawk went away after I figured out it was really hard getting over a wall with shit hanging all over your gear. And the fact that once your primary goes down and your secondary goes down, it's probably not time to pull it. First off, if your primary and secondary gone down, there's something wrong. And by the time you
Yep.
get a tomahawk out,
Last
like
of the Mohicans.
things are really out of control. Yeah.
No, it brings up a good point because when I first started in ASW, every like 10th round was a tracer round because we didn't have the the MVGs and stuff like that. So as far as we evolved, we get better and we start.
Sure.
And we all did stupid things when we were young and we weren't really in a war situation as drastically, and you start to realize that thing, white light compromises you,
Yeah.
as far as not having a suppressor, basically muzzle flash. When you get to ID the bad guy because of the muzzle flash, you appreciate that you don't have muzzle flash.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for coming and spending a few hours of your time on the show with us and spitting some truth. Some tough pills to swallow, but I think it's important for people to hear them.
Yeah, and to my community out there, I'm just trying to help us. So I hope this helps. I really do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the integrity, and we'll see all of you guys on Friday with Pat O'Donnell.
Be there, be square.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.